And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive. It is still Friday, August 5th. I am still Josh Engelman. He is still Adam Scher. We are still doing a 13-game MLB slate for today. Not a lot has changed in the past 4 hours, but we're going to go through it once again anyway, because now we need to start making those final decisions as we work our way towards lock. Don't forget, we are also sponsored by OddShopper. We will talk about them in a bit. Hit that like button, notification bell, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. Adam, how are you? How was your afternoon?
It was good. Don't totally remember what I did, but I did a best ball draft. Got my videos out, went and got more coffee. So yeah, it was good.
Don't remember what I did. That's scary. Just like, were you already at the bar?
I thought about it, but no, I haven't drank since Dallas.
Nor have I. I may have an early drink tomorrow for Liverpool at 7:30, but I don't want to have more than one.
Yeah, I'm debating. I might go out for a little bit tonight and just grab a drink. And I mean, I did it last week and it went well for MMA, so maybe do it again before tomorrow. But yeah, I don't know. It's been kind of nice to just not go out.
Does that mean that I have to get an IV tomorrow morning to start?
Oh yeah,
We got to recreate everything.
Yeah, you better go get the tourniquet that you left in Dallas.
It's a shame. Yeah, I threw that in the garbage. Yeah, I still have no idea why he left that for me. As if I would want my own like personal tourniquet.
Yeah.
What does he think? I mean, unless he just assumes that I'm going to need that for my day-to-day. Really weird thing to leave me.
Yeah, like when I heard him say it, I was trying to put together like what he was thinking and why he was leaving it. And I was like, oh, it must just be a IV thing because I don't get it.
No, I mean, they just wrap it with, like rubber at my local spot. So it's like the equivalent of a rubber band wrapped around my bicep. Right. So I don't know. Appreciate the effort. That guy was incredibly nice and without question, incredibly helpful for everything that I needed in my life at that point in time. This slate is going to be hard. I just realized that I hadn't registered until like right before we started the show. So I'm good to go now, but I legitimately, I know you never know what you're going to have until like 7:04, but this really feels like one of those slates where I can have just about anything in my lineups when lock arises and I would believe it.
Yeah. I mean, I ran right before the show with our most recent update. I just ran like not even a crunch to see what my lineups would look like, but just to kind of see if there were any spots or what spots I would think that I'm over or under the field. And everything kind of just came out pretty flat, just like it was this morning. So I think it's really, as far as what my actual exposures end up being, I think it's going to very heavily depend on what the final ownership update looks like because the margins are just very thin right now.
This is one of those days where like I really don't want a late scratch at like 6:55.
Yeah.
It's just gonna be like, whatever, I don't care. Like I'll deal with it after.
I mean, that's normally what I do anyway, but
yeah. Well, like it's one of those times where now it feels like it could affect me in an aggressive way because I'm just like have a heavy stand on something I would have never thought I had before.
Right.
Like I won't know that it affects me yet.
Right. Yeah. Normally it'll be some guy and you're like, oh yeah, whatever. I'm not getting, I know.
It's like, I don't have the Giants today.
Right. Yeah.
So, and today it could just be like, I don't have them. And it's just like, oh shit, they're my second most exposed stack.
Yeah. I've never had that feeling before.
Yeah, I'm sure. 10 Porch says, let me guess, Josh, Acuna is a must play, not for us non-Braves fans.
I don't know what that means.
I have no clue. No clue. I'm not confident that I've ever said anybody is a must play in baseball ever, other than pitching.
And if you were going to, Acuna is a pretty good one.
Yeah, as far as must plays go, like he's probably in the top 10 today. But we shall see. Let's hit the super chat right out of the gate. George says, for this slate size, what are your recommended primary and secondary stack sizes for DK? Either 5 or 4 and 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0.
Yeah, I mean, I do the same as for most slates. I'll run some 5-3, 5-2, 5X, and then a little bit of 4-4, 4-3. But typically, I'm just running 5 bands with some sort of mini stack.
Yeah. Yeah, primarily 5s and 4s for me. How they get divvied up after that, I'm not all that worried about it. Sort of depends on the slate size. Like on a day like today, in theory, like the 5 3s and 4 4s are probably going to play a little bit better. You grab a little bit of extra correlation on a day where the slate is smaller. You can probably get away with mixing and matching a little bit more, but I don't think there's like a true answer to that question. But 5 and 4 is pretty much where I draw the line. Do you ever run any 3-3-2s?
Not on slates this size. I'll do it on like 3 gamers.
Yeah. Yeah. What I can tell you to do is not or like to make sure to stack. That experiment went so poorly. As expected, too, by the way. All right, you ready?
Yep.
Let's do it. Phillies and Nats, 5.1 run implied total for the Phils, 3.8 for the Nats. Kyle Gibson and Josiah Gray. Gibson, 16% owned. Josiah Gray at a crisp 4. Gibson, 7K. He is the highest owned pitcher, 7K or below. And outside of Robbie Ray, Eric Lauer, and Dylan Cease, he's the 4th most owned pitcher. The pitching ownership actually got more extreme than it was this morning. How do you feel about 16% ownership on Kyle Gibson?
I think it looks a little bit better than it did this morning when he was 20%, but it's the same sort of issue we had this morning. I think he projects well. He's one of the more underpriced pitchers on this slate. He's got a good matchup against Washington. They don't strike out a lot, but they're also just not a very good offense. He's a decent pitcher in terms of run prevention, not a great pitcher at getting strikeouts, 18.5% strikeout percentage, 4.2 xFIP this year. I do think that he's over-owned relative to guys around him. When you look in that price range, I understand why he's getting more ownership than somebody like Herman Marquez or Jose Barrios or Kluber for a little bit more. I understand why he's the highest owned, but I don't think it should be by the margins that it is. So I still think it's a spot where Gibson looks good. If you have contrarian stacks, by all means, play Gibson. But I don't think he's head and shoulders better than the other pitchers around him, like the ownership suggests that he is.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you right now. I just think it's going to be easier for me to get to some of these guys in and around this area. In particular, Corey Kluber, who's popping a lot for me and not popping at all in our current ownership projections. Kluber, $1,200 more expensive, but this is sort of like a mid-tier that I'm looking at. Josiah Gray for you at all? 4% owned?
I think it's kind of a tough one. It's a relatively dangerous matchup for him facing the Phillies in Philadelphia. He's had major home run issues this year, allowing over 2 home runs per 9. He does have good strikeout stuff. He has the 3rd highest strikeout percentage on this slate behind Cease and Ray. 4.2 xFIP, 2.1 home runs per 9, 27% strikeout percentage. Really a boom or bust spot. So if you're stacking a popular team, I can understand going to him just for upside purposes if you wanted to get away from some of the more popular pitching. But I don't think it's somebody I'm going to end up prioritizing just because he's a little bit more expensive than that 7K range where there's a lot of pitchers that I expect to get to.
Let's talk bats here. Lots of ownership coming into the Philadelphia Phillies. 3rd in aggregate ownership. They are 5th in our top stack tool. I have them 2nd, but it's basically the same top stack number. Very little margin between a lot of these teams. Most of this ownership is coming into Kyle Schwarber at 23%. And then you get Hoskins and Real Muto, just around that 10 mark, which they should. How do you feel about this Phillies stack? I
think they look pretty good. I mentioned the home run issues that Gray has had. It has been predominantly left-handed hitters, which for him actually sets up pretty nicely because Schwarber clearly has a ton of power from the left side. Derek Hall has power, but then the only other 2 lefties in the lineup are Bryson Stott and Brandon Marsh hitting 8-9. So far this year, Gray has a 28.9% strikeout percentage, only a 154 expected ISO and a 282 expected WOBA to righties, whereas against lefties, a 24.7% strikeout percentage with a 256 expected ISO and a 352 expected WOBA. So pretty drastic splits for him. It does make Kyle Schwarber look extremely good. It makes Derek Hall look very good as well.
I took a sip at the moment you started ending that sentence. It was just perfect timing. Schwarber certainly in the cash game discussion.
Yeah, for sure.
Hoskins, Real Muto, probably not like the most outlandish options if you were to get to them, but seems like Schwarber would be the first one in.
Yep, like there's obviously a lot of options in the outfield, but Schwarber looks great.
What about on the Nats side? 13% or 13th in aggregate ownership, 17th in our top stack tool. This is a team with not a very good lineup. Is there any value in trying to get to the opposite side of Gibson?
Not a ton. I mean, Washington's lineup just sucks. Robles is cheap, Garcia is cheap, Voigt's cheap, Keibert Ruiz is cheap, but on a slate this size, I don't anticipate getting to much Washington.
Is there anything else we should touch on from this game?
I don't think so.
I agree. On to your Orioles and the Pirates. 4.7 run implied total for the Orioles, 3.9 for the Pirates. Dean Kramer and Mitch Keller going in this one. Kramer down to 7% owned. He was a little bit more owned this morning. No ownership going to Mitch Keller. I'm going to stand by my story that I think these guys are equal, probably because I have them projected for the exact same amount of fantasy points. I would rather get to Keller by a little bit, but neither one of these guys are any sort of priority. They're just more guys that you could pay down for that aren't Kyle Gibson.
Yeah, I think both guys are actually going a little bit under-owned here. Keller by a bigger margin than Kramer, obviously, since he's getting like no ownership. This lineup for Baltimore is weaker than it was projected this morning. No Austin Hayes again. You have Brett Phillips in there. As much as I love Brett Phillips, the person, and he's good defensively and he's fast, the dude strikes out constantly and cannot hit. So having him in place of Hayes is a pretty big deal, even though he's hitting ninth. So, whereas all season long I've talked about 1 through 6 for the Orioles being good, right now we're down to 1 through 4, and then, Vavra and Urias, basically a league average hitter. Terran Vavra projects to be around league average. So it's not as dangerous a lineup for Baltimore as we've had at other times this year. There are some strikeouts too with Odor and Phillips in particular in the lineup. 6,500 for Keller looks fine. 6,600 for Kramer against the Pirates looks fine as well. Neither one's a priority, just given that we don't really need to pay down at pitcher on this slate. There's plenty of guys that are a little bit more expensive than Kramer and Keller that functionally are going to allow you to get the same thing into your lineups. But these are guys where, like, if you're looking to pivot away from Kyle Gibson, for example, I think these guys are both going under-owned, whereas Gibson's going a little bit over-owned.
How do you feel about your Orioles bats here? 10th in our top stack tool, 5th in ownership. A lot of that just going to Mullins and Rutschman Mountcastle as well, not Santander. This is just not the same lineup without Mancini in it. I understand why the top two guys are getting sort of some love, but I don't have a ton of interest in Baltimore. They're just, like, if I get to some Baltimore, it makes sense, but it's not a priority.
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. In the aggregate, I think they're going a bit over-owned, but again, that's just driven by Mullins and Rutschman in particular getting some ownership. Mountcastle's cheap at 3,200, 9% owned. That's fine as well. Keller has done a better job limiting power this year than in the past. It's come at the expense of his strikeout percentage, but only a 155 expected ISO to righties and a 120 expected ISO to lefties. He actually has an xFIP just shy of 4 as well. So it's a spot where, if I get to a little bit of Baltimore, that's fine. I do think Mullins and Rutschman in particular look good, but they don't really stand out as priorities to me.
Yeah. Wow. It's crazy. It's incredible how much more interested I might be in this Orioles team today if it was last year's Park.
Yeah, agreed.
On the Pirates side, 8th in aggregate ownership, 17th in our top stack tool. This is basically like the exact same situation as Baltimore. Top two guys in the order are pulling like 10% ownership, and then it's pretty flat elsewhere. This is our number 3 value stack. Is there anything here for you for Pittsburgh?
Not really, just because I don't really think you need hitter value all that much on this slate because there's not a ton of pitching to pay up for. I think it's just going to be pretty easy to make strong lineups that don't involve the Pirates. You do have Marcano leading off at 2K flat with multi-position eligibility, so that's a good value if you need it. Brian Reynolds at 4K, I think it's very fair to say, is underpriced. Kramer so far this season, 239 expected ISO to righties with only a 13.4% strikeout percentage, nearly a 25% strikeout percentage against lefties with a 158 expected ISO. He's facing a lineup that is predominantly left-handed. As far as right-handed power goes, Brian Hayes is going to be the guy that you point to.
I think this is going to be one of the games that I am fully close. I might have more Mitch Keller than anybody in this game.
I assume I end up with more of the bats, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just not seeing it for today. I'm honestly a little surprised I'm not getting to more Baltimore. I don't think the prices are all that crazy. Their implied total looks pretty solid for this slate. Is that I don't know if it's just like a Mitch Keller thing because he does have a pretty good projected FIP, but I actually thought that I would get a little bit more Baltimore, and I'm just not getting them right now.
Yeah, this is a tough game there's a lot of games like this on the slate. Yeah. It's a tough game right now for me to say what I'm actually going to end up playing because a lot of stuff just grades out as neutral. So this is definitely I've said before that even if I know what I'm playing, it's more important to talk through the reasoning and stuff than to try and like mimic exactly what I'm doing. But on a slate like this, like there's no point in me even really trying to guess at what I'm going to end up playing because it all just hinges on what the final ownership update looks like.
Anything else here?
Nope.
Mets and Braves, 4.4 run implied total for the Mets, 4 for the Braves. Taijuan Walker and Ian Anderson going in this one. Walker, no ownership. Ian Anderson, no ownership. I'm guessing if we're getting to anybody, it's probably more likely to be Ian Anderson just because Taijuan Walker is 9,100. Do you have any sort of interest in either one of these guys?
Not really. I do think they're both going under-owned, but it's another situation where they're just relatively low probability plays. Really difficult matchup for Anderson against the Mets. Dangerous matchup for Walker against the Braves as well, although there are strikeouts in that lineup. I mentioned Walker specifically on FanDuel in my tournament plays video. I do think he's a little bit better play there just because the pricing is, or the pricing is a little bit better. Like he's 9,200 on FanDuel, 9,100 on DraftKings, but you don't have the same, like, just 7K range that you do on DraftKings, where you have all these cheap arms that look relatively good. On FanDuel, also, you're getting, with it being a one pitcher site, like 50% of the 50+% of the combined ownership going to either Cease or Ray. So if you're getting away from them, I do think you can make the case for Walker in a good strikeout matchup, but still the same thing. It's a low probability spot where if and where I get to him, it's just going to be in specific lineups where I have popular bats and I'm trying to balance it out.
I missed the follow-up super chat from George before. He said, and thanks to your tips, got second in the DK 4-seamer and in the mini-max. Thanks for all the tips. Big time super chat. So congrats, man. 4-seamer, tough tourney to win. We're talking 20 max. One of the better contests in the industry, in my opinion. I think all the 20 max, like the main 20 max that gets run across most of the sports, whether it's the Birdie in PGA, I think it's the Haymaker in MMA. Those tournaments are fantastic, I think. So congrats to popping that. That's a nice payday. And congrats on the mini-max. Arguably one of the hardest tournaments to win, just given the volume of people that are in it in a given night.
Agreed.
Talking bats here now. Not a lot of ownership coming in on either side. The only guy that's getting any ownership is Ronald Acuna at 5,100. He's 11% owned. We talked about these guys yesterday in that we didn't love the idea of targeting them, but they were because of the pitching matchup, but they were two teams, quality bats, viable offenses, and we saw them be useful pieces of everything that happened yesterday. Do you see yourself getting to the Mets and Braves today?
I think they're both going a little bit under-owned here. The matchups aren't great. They're not bad. It's just another kind of neutral spot. But both of these teams have tons of power upside, and neither one's getting much ownership. We have the Mets right now at 2% ownership with a 4% chance of being the top stack. We have Atlanta at 3% ownership with a 2% ownership with a 3% chance of being the top stack. Neither pitcher gives up a ton of power. Walker this year, 150 expected ISO to righties, 154 to lefties. Anderson, sub 100 expected ISO to lefties, 151 to righties. So neither guy is somebody that you're looking at and pointing to it and saying oh, I think it's very likely that these offenses do well. But on a slate where there's just really flat top stack percentages across the board, I do like the idea of just getting the low owned Mets and Braves and hoping for the best because both of these offenses have a ton of talent.
Yeah, I have the Mets 7th in my top stack. I'm a little bit higher on them than we are, even from a percentage standpoint. I've got another full percentage point tacked on top. So I do find the Mets to be pretty interesting. I wish the order was shaken up a little bit. But at the same time, I think there's a decent chance. If you roster basically half of today's teams, you're going to be over the field on them just by default because they're not getting any ownership. It would not take a lot if you take 5% of the Mets, you're going to be in a decent spot if the Mets are the team that pops off. So I like the Mets more than I like the Braves. I don't like saying that out loud. Acuna for cash games, though, certainly viable.
Yeah, I think Schwarber's ahead of him, but certainly viable.
Yeah. I wouldn't be mad about either one of them. That would be one of the few names. We could put Acuna's name in the cash lineup, and that's not going to be the one you point out when some idiot takes your head-to-head. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, there will be somebody worse in head-to-heads against me. I should see if anybody's taking those yet.
Yeah. Anything else here?
I don't think so.
All righty. Schedule for the rest of the day. This one gets easy. It is Friday, which means we've got Live Before Lock coming up next. That's going to be Greg and Terry. I know Eric is out on the golf course with Jordan. So I hope they're having fun. But live before lock up at 6 o'clock, taking you all the way to 7:05. And then we're done. That's it. That's everything for today. I hope you guys are going to get a good night's sleep. Go watch Liverpool at 7:30 tomorrow morning. Just in case you're not, you guys should, in fact, do that.
I got a no badge taking one of my 1Ks. That should be interesting.
You got a what?
A no badge that took one of my 1Ks.
Interesting. Excited to see that lineup.
Yeah, it should be a good one.
DK Night Owl. This is going to be all of the night slate content. So all of the projections for each position, top stacks, top pitchers, that kind of stuff, all in one big table. So you can see everything in a quick snapshot. That DK Night Owl tool is free for today. Moving on to game number 4. The Guardians taking on the Astros. 3.5 run implied total for Cleveland. 5 for Houston. Hunter Gaddis going for the Guardians. Framber Valdez going for the Astros. No ownership coming into Valdez, 9,900. Not a great strikeout matchup, and the price is just sort of difficult to justify because he is well behind Dylan Cease and he is well behind Robbie Ray.
Yeah, he's projected to be under-owned, and normally when I do my top pitchers video, I am kind of just going down the list of top pitcher percentage and trying to find the ones closest to correctly owned or under-owned. Just flat out skipped over Valdez today because I was just like, from a value standpoint, there's just almost, I don't want to say no chance. I've done weird shit at pitcher before, but very little chance I can get to Valdez. Like, he's a good real life pitcher, but he's probably a little overpriced, at best correctly priced, on a slate where like every other pitcher is underpriced. So it just makes it really, really difficult to get there. 22% strikeout percentage against a team in Cleveland that doesn't strike out. Valdez has allowed an expected ISO below 100 to both sides of the plate this year. There's a pretty good chance that he just gives you a good start. So it's not like if he ends up in a lineup, it's a horrible play. It's just any lineup I build that has Valdez, I could then go back and probably just make it better by getting rid of him and doing something else.
Yeah. When I ran my crunch, I got 3%. And that's like a rounding error in these cases. Like, that's just going to happen and I'm just going to move forward. But I can't imagine getting all that much more than that. He would need a much better matchup. I think Cleveland might be like actually the worst matchup outside of like a much more talented offense. This is probably the team that strikes out the least.
Yeah, like I can kind of tell you any lineup that I were to make that had Valdez, I can kind of tell you what it looks like. It's like Philadelphia or Milwaukee or Tampa Bay stack with probably another like one or two popular one-offs or mini stack. And it's relatively inexpensive. So I have like Robbie Ray, and then I just have $9,900 to throw at Framber Valdez.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. We can't roster Hunter Gaddis because he does not have a salary. So he is only really relevant for evaluating Houston bats. Those Houston bats are 7th in aggregate ownership. They are the number 1 stack in our top stack tool. Yordan Alvarez is at 19% ownership, and no one else is above 8. What the hell are we doing here?
I like getting to Houston here. I think it's kind of like the White Sox spot last night. I think it's a huge wild card. Gaddis was extremely good at Double-A this year. 15 games, 14 starts, 32% strikeout percentage, like a 3.6 xFIP, 10 innings at Triple-A, and now he's in the majors facing the Astros. So the guy clearly had success at Double-A. This is also clearly a wildly different matchup facing the Houston Astros in your major league debut than anything he's faced at Double-A or Triple-A this year. So he has some semblance of talent that's reflected in his minor league numbers. He's also likely to struggle in his first start here against Houston, just a ridiculously difficult landing spot. They're getting some ownership, but not as much as other teams. They're the 4th highest owned team on the slate. So I do think that they just look good here. I'm certainly willing to take my chances on them. And do we have a lineup yet? I don't even see where they are. Do we have? Yeah, we do. Okay, so still an ugly lineup by their standards. No Vasquez. You do have the cheap Mancini piece. No Kyle Tucker again. So that does drive them down a little bit from where they were this morning. But they're also a little bit cheaper. Like 1 through 6, they're still good. Mancini's cheap. Gurriel's cheap. So I still like them. I would like them more if you had Vasquez, Tucker in there.
I got to a bunch of them so far. Let's see what my aggregate is here. They are My fourth most exposed team, slightly over the field here, but one of the five teams that I'm like pretty aggressively stacking. Although the Brewers are sort of breaking things for me, and we'll get to them in a bit. But for right now, I will happily be getting to Houston. They're easy to stack, honestly. If Yordan Alvarez is the only guy getting ownership, one, you're not mad about having Yordan Alvarez in a lineup, that's for sure. And two, like, it's not even highly owned after that. And you're getting premier positions, second, first. Then you get Alvarez in the third spot, Bregman at third. Mancini's got first outfield eligibility, so even more flexibility if you need it. Shortstop is next. It's a very easy team to put a stack together for.
Oh yeah, I didn't know if you were like asking me something, but yeah.
No, not really. I am going to ask you if you would like to roster anything from Cleveland, and I'm quite confident the answer is no.
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, yeah, if like Ramirez sneaks into a lineup or something, then sure, but really, really difficult to make any sort of case against somebody like Valdez that just gives up no power.
Yeah, there's so many of these teams just get negated by like good, not great pitchers, or even great if you want to, like Valdez is really, really good. Where it just becomes a situation where like, well, Valdez isn't getting any ownership, so there's no value there. Cleveland looks bad, 3.5 run implied total. Like there's just no justification on a 13-game slate. Tigers and Rays, 3.3 run implied total for the Tigers, 4.7 for the Rays. Brian Garcia and Corey Kluber. This is going to be interesting. So no one's rostering Garcia, and they shouldn't. He's not going deep into this game. We got to talk about Corey Kluber here. 8,200, projected for 5% ownership in a matchup against the Detroit Tigers, who for right now I have as the second worst offense on the slate behind the Reds. I have at this moment a lot of Corey Kluber. How do you feel about Kluber?
If he's actually 4.5% owned, I really like him. I'm kind of not entirely sure that's going to happen. But I do like the idea of getting him. It's a good matchup against the Tigers. He's a good enough pitcher. It's a reasonable enough price tag. 21.5% strikeout percentage, 3.84 xFIP this year. I think he's a pretty good pivot off of Gibson if you have the salary. The issue, and the reason that I think he's probably not going to be super popular, is he is $1,200 more than Gibson, and he's not a particularly good pivot off of Ray because they're just totally different in terms of upside. So it's more so, like, I'd like getting the Kluber if I can afford him, but I'm also not going to be looking to sacrifice too much to get to him.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I look at Eric Lauer being 31% owned, and I look at Corey Kluber being 5%, and I'm just getting most of that Lauer ownership. I'm still getting Lauer at 13%, but I'm getting, like 20 of Kluber because I think it just looks better from a ownership perspective. So looks like Corey Kluber is going to be my guy, and I'm pretty happy about it, honestly. The Tigers stink. I got him at a 24% aggregate K rate, so it's a really good strikeout matchup. Not that he's like the biggest strikeout pitcher in the world any longer, but this just is going to be the spot where I'm taking a stand. He's my third most exposed pitcher right now.
For what it's worth, I don't think he's a great pivot off of Lauer either. Like, I think Lauer is pretty clearly better. I have him 3.5 points higher on DraftKings than Kluber.
There's our difference.
Yeah, I mean, one reason is that Lauer has a 24% strikeout percentage compared to Kluber's 21.5%. Another reason is that Kluber just isn't going more than like 90 pitches ever, whereas Lauer can go north of 100. The matchup is good for both guys. So I still think, that the gap between them certainly isn't 6-1 in terms of being optimal. And so the ownership gap is too big, but I don't particularly like that pivot either, unless I'm building a lineup where I need to save ownership.
I have it by 0.8. So at that point in time, the ownership becomes the bigger difference for me. So I'm getting to quite a bit of Corey Kluber, at least as of right now. And I don't think that's going to change. I'm just going to be a little bit lighter on Lauer, a little bit heavier on Barrios, a little bit heavier on Kluber, and just sort of take a wider range in that 8K range.
Yeah, I think that's a fine approach. I think most lineups, though, I'm just going to end up going to Lauer.
We're not talking Brian Garcia, so let's talk Rays bats. Third in our top stack tool, second in aggregate ownership, but once again, most of it is going to Brandon Lau, 20% in fact. David Peralta also pulling a little bit of it. Do you like going to this Tampa stack?
Yes and no. I mean, I think, like you said, the aggregate ownership's a little bit misleading because of Brandon Lau's ownership. You're also getting 13% to Peralta, around 10% to Choi. It's a good spot against a pitcher, that isn't likely to be very good in Garcia. There's value here as well. So it's a situation where, it's a good matchup and it's easy to get to them and build good lineups around them. So all of that looks good. Brandon Lau, I think, is your cash game second baseman most likely. So certainly happy to play him, but there are just, a lot of other teams that are getting less ownership that look good as well.
So right now I have the Rays as my second biggest fade behind the Royals, who we'll definitely get to in a bit. Not really sure what's driving it. I just think that there are so many comparable teams that the moment one of them starts pulling any sort of ownership, I'm just grabbing the one that isn't. I think that's really just the easiest way this is going to happen for me.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's tough because like Brandon Lau, I think is a great play, but I think it's more likely that I just end up like going to lower own stacks and then throwing Brandon Lau in than 5-man stacking a lot of Tampa. For what it's worth this season, Choi a 175 expected ISO against right-handed pitching, same ballpark for Lau. Diaz at 102. Peralta actually at 192. That's surprisingly high. Luke Raley, 43 plate appearances, but sub 100. It's, Rosarena is hitting 6th instead of 4th. It's not the most exciting lineup to get to either.
Tigers bats, number 6 value.
Not really. I think if this were a different type of slate where you had more pitching to pay up for, or just, more correctly priced pitching, you could make a case, but it's just hard for me to want to get to a Tigers team that's really bad and facing a good enough pitcher.
750 viewers in here, 118 likes. I think we're putting together a pretty good show. Lots of talking points. Maybe you guys can reward us by hitting that thumbs up. Let's run that number up to 150. That's where we should be quickly. So let's do that. Larry, see the good old days, man. Doing shows with Jake. I haven't done a show with Jake in ages.
Yeah, I'll say I don't know the last time I did a show with Jake. I'm sure it was last baseball season at some point, but
the show I did with Jake was the first time I ever did a show with like a second person. Because I'd only done all my solo stuff until I came here, and I did a couple solo NBA videos, and then baseball started at the beginning of April, and they were like, "You guys should do these shows together." I was like, "I don't know how to talk to somebody else. I don't know how to host a show. I don't know any of this shit." The rest is history, I guess. Do you remember who you did your first show with?
Ever?
Yeah.
No.
Not a very rewarding first time.
I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think back. Like, yeah, I couldn't tell you.
And like, is there a short list off the top of your head, or are there some legitimate like it could be random people that I would never remember?
My actual guess is probably some combination of Eric Beimfor and this guy Max that I worked with at like the very first company I ever did content for. As far as shows that maybe more than like 5 people watched, it would have been some combination of EMAC, Eddie Fear, Draft Cheat, Manny. But I couldn't tell you like who it was.
Fair. Rangers and White Sox. 3.2 run implied total for the Rangers, 4.4 for the White Sox. Glenn Otto and Dylan Cease. We're not rostering Otto. We are rostering Dylan Cease, 10,400, and succeeds by default here today. Just really, really good. Big time stuff. 35% owned and warranted.
Yeah, agreed. He's getting ownership. Like, he's technically over-owned, but also just projects really well. He's got the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 27.5%. 3.57 xFIP is very good. Mediocre matchup against Texas. Nothing special there one way or the other, but just a really, really good pitcher, and it's not going to be that difficult to get up to him. I mentioned him on FanDuel in my tournament plays video also, even though he is going over-owned, just because he's the only guy on the slate that really has comparable, or he's the only guy on the slate that has a better strikeout percentage than Robbie Ray at 33%. I was reading Robbie Ray's numbers by accident. Cease has a 33% strikeout percentage, 3.02 xFIP, both of which are the best on the slate. Ray's second, but He's the only guy with a better strikeout percentage than Ray. So on FanDuel, he's getting like 1/3 the ownership, and he is more expensive, but there's just going to be a lot of lineups where that doesn't matter that much. So I do like, even though he is going a little bit over-owned, I like the fact that just getting to him by itself gets you away from 40+% owned Robbie Ray, and you're not sacrificing your ceiling because he has even better strikeout stuff.
For the first time in a while, like we look at Cortez and Valdez next to Cease, but I don't see a problem with the ownership disparity there. Like, in the grand scheme of things, is it ridiculous? Yes, but like Cease really is quite a bit ahead of Cortez and Valdez. Like, they are not the same thing at the top. Normally, we're just like, okay, like it shouldn't be a 10-to-1 ownership relationship or whatever, but like it probably should today.
Right. I mean, I have Cease like 5 points ahead of those guys. So do we on the website. Alex, has him there as well. If I look at the optimal percentage that I came up with, I have Cease at like 18% on DraftKings. I have Valdez at like 7, Cortez at like 5. So again, like, should it be 10-to-1? No, but you also don't build lineups by just trying to find, lump together all of the most under-owned guys. Their chances of success is also a big part of it.
We're getting to any backs in this game. The White Sox are currently 8th in our top stack tool, 17th in ownership. So there's a little bit of positive leverage here, but it doesn't seem like something I'm going to be realizing.
Yeah, I'm sort of interested in the White Sox. Their ownership has come up a little bit, / their top stack percentage has come down a bit since this morning. Like I had said, it probably would. And that's because I'm looking at FanDuel also. So that makes it a little bit different. Getting back to the DraftKings page, same thing though. 5% ownership, 2.5%, or 2.5% ownership, 5% chance of being the top stack. They're relatively expensive. Otto's not a very good pitcher, so like I do like getting to them. I think they're kind of in that same bucket with like the Braves and the Mets, in that the matchup is better for Chicago, but the offense isn't quite as good.
Yeah, this was the team that I actually thought that I was going to be getting to, and it's just not happening. I got 2 4-man stacks of the White Sox on the crunch that I ran earlier. So,
I mean, yeah. So Otto this year, 223 expected ISO to lefties, 186 to righties. I certainly wouldn't be surprised or upset if I get to the White Sox. I do think they're going a little bit under-owned. The thing that just kind of stands out and makes me think that I might not is you have in their top 6, him on DraftKings, Jimenez is 4,300. Every other hitter is at least 4,800. So it's just a tough team to stack unless you're going to go down to the bottom of the order. Yasmani Grandal at 3,900 is fine, but like I don't want a lot of Josh Harrison. I don't want a lot of Sebi Zavala. So it's a team where if I'm getting to them, I mean, I guess if you pair like Ray Gibson or Ray Marquez or something, you're still only spending like $16K, so you could make it work. But I'm interested to see kind of where I get to, because they're not the best value stack, but I'm also just not sure it's going to matter on this slate.
Stacking against Cease?
No, thank you.
Kind of figured.
Oh, that explains why I'm not getting to a lot of KC.
You had them unchecked?
No, no Bobby Witt. I hadn't actually looked at the lineup. I just run everything.
How happy are you?
Very. Seeing Kansas City projected in the stuff I ran before the show to be over-owned made me feel really good. Like maybe I won't jam them in.
Well, you should jam all of your $0 into OddShopper. Yes, it's a free tool. You don't have to jam in anything. You just get it. And if you're into sports betting at all, I think it's going to be one of the best places that you can go in the industry. Let's just say that you want to put some bets in and you are in a legal state. Right out of the gate, you're going to be able to shop around for the best line that you can find. And that is going to provide a ton of value to you. It's just going to keep additional money in your pocket. It's always going to be beneficial to you to take the best number that you can find. So you should do that. And you can do that via OddShopper. But it doesn't stop there. Our player props pages are, I mean, the value here that people are probably sleeping on is pretty high. We're showing you guys the projection for those props. We're showing you the expected ROI, and we're showing you the expected win rate. And it's costing you nothing. Zilch, nada. $0. You just get this stuff. You guys should be taking advantage of this every day, even if you're not interested in sports betting. There's plenty of utility here to be found. And it's not even just from looking at those props or shopping for lines. We got a parlay builder that will help you out here, help you build optimized parlays. There's an ARB tool on the site that I think will help you guys out a lot. But really, pay attention to those expected win rates. Pay attention to those expected ROIs. Those bets are ready to go for you. If you like them when you look at them, you are one click away from just getting directly to that sports book and putting in that bet. So I can't sell it much more than that. It's a free tool that only costs you a registration with an email address. It doesn't get any easier than that. Take advantage. Go use OddShopper. And 800 people in here. I asked for 150 likes earlier. You guys are all the way up to 182. Seems to me we should just immediately get to 200. 18 more thumbs ups gets us to the 200 mark, and that'll be with a half hour to go. Just take advantage, guys. Hit that thumbs up. Brewers and Reds. This is the big one for me. 5.2 run implied total for the Brewers, 3.5 for the Reds. Eric Lauer and Robert Duggar going in this one. Lauer, dream matchup. Reds are dog shit. 91 aggregate WRC plus in this spot. Lauer, 8K, pulling 31% ownership. Do I want to get to Eric Lauer today? Absolutely. This matchup looks fantastic. I do believe he's a hair over-owned, and I think that there are other options around him that you could sort of offload some of that ownership to, but make no mistake about it. This is a really good play today.
Yep, completely agree. I think I made that clear when we were talking about Kluber, but 24% strikeout percentage. You look at the guys ahead of him. The only pitchers ahead of him on this slate in strikeout percentage are Cease, Ray, Gray, Cortez, and Malley. We've talked about Cease. Like him a lot. He's also quite a bit more expensive. Robbie Ray, we will talk about. Nothing negative to say there. Josiah Gray, fine, tough matchup. Nestor Cortez, brutal matchup, and a lot more expensive. Tyler Malley, really difficult matchup. Eric Lauer facing the Reds. Just really stands out here. The Reds have not been very good offensively all year. They also traded guys. This lineup just is not very good. And again, Lauer is a solid pitcher. He's gone over 100 pitches in 3 of his last 5 starts, over 90 in all of them. 8K price tag is too cheap here. He looks good. The ownership is something to consider. 31%. You can't just ignore that. He's, if I have a popular lineup, then I'm probably going to get away from Lauer and go somewhere else. But, outside of that, as long as, assuming I'm playing some sort of relatively low owned stack, Lauer is one of the guys I expect to be getting a lot of.
I'm trying to pull up our top pitchers tool because I just want to see everything next to each other. I want to just see the relationship here. So Lauer, 13% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 11% chance of being a top 2 value. You get like Tyler Mahle, not too far away from those numbers. Corey Kluber, not too far away from those numbers. I guess here's the question for you, because I'm sure people will, anybody that's using our content is going to look at our top pitchers tool and see that Robbie Ray's got negative 35% leverage, that Dylan Cease has negative 13% leverage, that Eric Lauer has negative 18% leverage. How would you sort of explain those numbers? And I don't want to say like explain why they're wrong, but like, why does that carry less weight for you?
That was way too long of a question to ask me. I think the general question you were asking was, why do I still want to play the pitchers that are projected to be overowned?
Yes. So the top 3 pitchers, when you open the top pitchers tool, pretty high in negative leverage. Explain to people why that isn't necessarily as relevant to you.
So for one, it's one spot in your lineup. And so you want to keep in mind that you're trying to build an entire lineup that's good. Again, you're not just trying to find the most underowned players on a slate, because frequently that's going to be a really shitty lineup, even if they're all not getting enough ownership. Especially, with just the fact that chalk these days is typically better than it has been in the past, because there's just better projections and better DFS players. So for one, it's taking up one spot in your lineup. I know that's something I've talked about a lot, where stacks, you're talking about half of your lineup being popular, and it can be difficult to be contrarian elsewhere. Also, pitchers are there's less variance in pitcher projections than there is in hitter projections. So there is still plenty of it. It's not to say that, pitchers are just going to hit their projection all the time, but typically good pitchers are going to be good more often than good hitters are going to be good. So there's that. And then it's also, you're still just trying to balance projection, and this goes back to it being one roster spot. You're trying to balance projection or, ceiling, or whatever you want to call call it, with ownership. And so with it only being one roster spot, Robbie Ray, for example, I think projects like 5 points higher than anybody else on the slate. If you give up Robbie Ray, you're already playing way from behind in terms of the part where you're trying to maximize for projection. Yes, you're giving up a lot in terms of ownership, but with it only being one spot in your lineup, chances are you can just make better projected lineups that are similar in terms of ownership by sucking it up and playing Robbie Ray or playing Dylan Cease, and then just making up for it with hitters where the gap isn't as big.
Perfect.
Gap in projection isn't as big.
I knew it was going to look startling when I looked at it, so it felt like a really good day to try to talk that through, because on a 13-game slate, you rarely get somebody to 60% ownership without like a really good reason. So,
wow, I can't believe this was a real take in chat. Somebody called me humble, and I thought they were just being sarcastic, but he was serious.
He's humble like Connor for real is humble.
Who?
You never watched Pop Star?
No, I thought you were going to say McGregor, and that would have worked too, though.
No. Connor for real is Andy Samberg's character in Pop Star, where he's basically like Justin Bieber crossed with you. Like he has a song called, I believe it's called I'm So Humble, but it's just an entire song about like basically him not being humble. You should listen to it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'll check it out. But yeah, it sounds about right. I
and
100%
watch the movie. It's hilarious.
100% thought that was a sarcastic comment when I first saw it.
Well, this is a real comment. This is my number one stack of the day. Brewers are fourth in our top stack, fourth in ownership. It is the team that I currently have the most by far. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Robert Duggar is probably the worst starting pitcher that will play this year. So only Yelich above 12% ownership. I will have more Brewers than anybody else. At least that's how it looks at 534. How do you feel about Milwaukee?
They look really good here. Duggar, we talked about it this morning. I didn't realize like kind of how bad he is because I think I just have one good start from 3 years ago, like ingrained in my head. But he's just never shown any semblance of being any good, really, ever. 2019 made 7 starts for Miami, 34 and a third innings pitched, 6.17 xFIP. Barely was in the majors the next year. 12 appearances total, 4 starts for Seattle in 2021, 5.41 xFIP. This year, AAA for Cincinnati, 42 and 2/3 innings, 5.55 xFIP. 16 innings for Tampa Bay, 5 starts, 5.41 xFIP. Throws like 90 miles an hour. There's like, he still certainly can have a game because it's baseball, but like there are no redeeming qualities about this guy that I can point to.
No, not at all. He's really, really bad. I think honestly that he's the worst pitcher that I've ever seen on my screen for this type of evaluation via Steamer. A 5.62 projected FIP is something that I don't think I've ever seen.
The one that comes to mind for me, and I don't know if it's as bad or not, Nick Margevicius, when he first came up for San Diego a few years ago, I did like just a 5-minute rant on like, there is no chance this guy is good. And then he ended up like for half a season actually like being a decent pitcher.
Yeah, I'm unloading on the Brewers here, and I hope they absolutely unload on Duggar. So I've got 20-something% of Yelich, Adames, Rowdy Tellez, and Colton Wong. Clearly have a lot of McCutchen as well. I'm everywhere here. Give me all the Brewers. Okay. Don't give me all the Reds, however.
Yeah, no, I don't have any interest in getting to the Reds. Like if I had to, Farmer at 3,600 looks okay. Senzel at 2,400 hitting second looks okay. Aquino will give you a 2K guy that's going to swing from his heels, and if he hits it, it's going to go far. It probably won't hit it though. But yeah, I mean, just not a team that I'm interested in.
Are the Reds the most interesting value team just because of Lauer's ownership?
Are the Reds what?
Like because Lauer's in the 30s in ownership, and we have all these teams that are like super high values that just provide like nothing today. Do the Reds sort of become the more interesting value team because of Lauer?
I don't really think so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just that's not really a part of my strategy. We've talked about that before where I think some other people that are good weight it more than I do. On a slate this size, that's just not really going to come into play for me. If this were a shorter slate, it naturally would because the ownership going to Lauer is going to drive down the ownership on the Reds, and I would just naturally get to some Reds. But yeah. On a slate of this size, I mean, the Reds can bury Lauer and still not be a team you need to get to. Like if they score 4-5 runs, against Lauer. Lauer's not going to be somebody you want, but the Reds aren't really going to be where you want to be either, unless it happens to be one or two guys just hitting like, scoring 20 something points. But
Sure.
The point there being on a slate of this size, like you cannot have Lauer and not need the Reds either.
Very true.
If it were, like a 3-game slate, if you don't have Lauer, there's a good chance that if you don't need him, it's because the Reds were one of the best teams on the slate.
Royals and Red Sox, 4.6 run implied total for the Royals, 4.7 for the Red Sox. Zach Greinke and Josh Winkowski, neither one of these guys getting any ownership. They're both basically the same price, and as best I could tell, they're both shitty.
Agreed. Kansas City, I think. Well, we kind of already talked about them. I wasn't getting to a lot of them, and that sort of surprised me. But the lineup is a little bit weaker than normal. No Bobby Witt in the lineup, so that takes out the shortstop that I normally love getting to. You do have a 2K second baseman hitting second in Michael Massey. You have Nick Pratto back in the lineup hitting sixth. He's a top 100 prospect. Pasquantino is still too cheap. Melendez and Perez are both good catcher options, but they're getting the ownership that they deserve, if not a little bit too much. So I don't think that they really stand out as a team I expect to be 5-man stacking. More likely I'm getting mini stacks and one-offs. Boston's interesting to me. It's not a great park to hit in, but it is warm in Kansas City. Boston getting 6% ownership right now, 7% chance of being the top stack, going up against Greinke, who has only struck out 10% of lefties this year, about 15.5% of righties, 208 expected ISO to righties, only 138 to lefties. But I will certainly take my chances on Rafael Devers. Duran's cheap and leading off, Verdugo's cheap hitting fifth. And then you do have right-handed power with guys like Bogarts, Martinez, and to some extent Tommy Pham. So I'm more interested in the Red Sox side given the ownership.
I am expecting if Locke was right now, the Royals would be my biggest fade of the day. I'm not, other than I think they're pulling a lot of their ownership because of their value, and I don't find their value to be all that interesting today. I don't need the money in any way. It's really easy to get to everything that you could possibly want, thanks to Robbie Ray. And on the Boston side, I'll have nothing crazy. 21%, or Devers at 21%. You're probably playing him in cash, and you should. But this is just, I wish that I had more Boston against Greinke. I just don't. And I think that's going to be because I'm over on a couple of other teams that are just not getting any ownership. And we're going to get to one of them.
I think that's completely reasonable.
In the next game. Anything else here? Royals and Red Sox. I like that you're getting a reprieve today from Kansas City. Maybe at least.
Yeah, I mean, you'll probably get the message at 7:06. Like, damn it.
Still there.
Still on Kansas City.
Yeah. Twins and Blue Jays. 4.1 run implied total for the Twins. 4.5 for the Blue Jays. Tyler Mahle and Jose Barrios going in this one. Mahle 5% owned, Barrios 3% owned. Barrios, it's not a fun matchup at all against Minnesota. There's some power there, but 7,700. He's just going to be another guy that I'm getting to in that high 7s, low 8 range where I'm going to get 10 to 15%, and it's just going to flatten out my ownership in that mid tier. I don't have anything really to write home for other than he does pitch well in Minnesota.
Yeah, he's another pitcher that I think is relatively low probability to succeed. It is a tough matchup, but he's also going a little bit under-owned. So it's more so in given lineups, I'll play Barrios over somebody like Gibson. But if I've already taken care of the ownership issue, then I'll gladly just play Kyle Gibson because he projects better, or play Eric Lauer because he projects better. So he's just another guy that you can use to offset ownership if you need to in tournaments, but not somebody who looks like a priority. Same really can be said for Tyler Mahle. He's got one of the better strikeout percentages on the slate at 25.9%, fifth highest, 3.97 xFIP. Also an absolutely brutal matchup against the Blue Jays. They have Whit Merrifield in their lineup. It's just a really good Toronto lineup. No George Springer. So, I guess if you're trading Springer for Merrifield from Tyler Mahle's point of view, you would take that. But still a tough spot for him. Not somebody I expect to get a lot of, even though he is a good pitcher.
All righty. I'm going to talk Blue Jays first, just because it matters to me. 7th in our top stack tool, 12th in ownership. This is my third most exposed team at this moment. They are not pulling all that much ownership. I'm guessing the Springer change would even negate it a little bit, but I'm going to be 2x, maybe 3x the field if they are a 3% owned team. I love the idea of getting to Toronto today, just because Mahle does have a little bit of an issue with righties, which is rare to see. It's, as you mentioned earlier today, it has tapered off a bit, but I like the idea of getting to the righty power for Toronto.
Yeah, they're similar to the Mets and the Braves for me. I have a lot of respect
Yeah.
for Tyler Mahle, and now he's getting out of Cincinnati as well, which is good for him. But you just can't ignore how much upside there is in the Blue Jays lineup, and they're not getting much ownership. You mentioned it, and I talked about it this morning. Mahle has been better at limiting power to righties this year than he has in the past. He's been throwing his splitter to them more at the expense of his slider. Better pitch, better results. But that's also not consistently facing Vlad Guerrero and Gurriel and Hernandez and Bichette and all these guys. So just based on the ownership, even though I do have a lot of respect for Tyler Mahle, I think the Blue Jays are fine.
Yeah, I've got 15% Kirk right now, 14% Bichette, 11 on Witt, or at least I did have 11 on Witt. I also had 7 on Springer, so we'll see how this shakes out when I rerun all of this stuff the moment we leave this show. But for right now, at least, it's looking like I'm going to be over the field on Toronto, and that helped me out yesterday. I'm hoping it helps me out again today. What about Minnesota? 19th in top stack, 12th in ownership. It's clearly a lot of good bats at the top of this lineup, but I don't know how much I'm going to get to.
I like Minnesota here because they're not very expensive, and Barrios is just so boom or bust. He's been a good pitcher throughout his career. He still has a 3.95 xFIP this year, which is reasonable, but he's allowing 1.7 home runs per 9. He's really had trouble with left-handed bats, allowing a 235 expected ISO with only a 19% strikeout percentage, 187 expected ISO with a 24% strikeout percentage to righties. It makes Arias look good. Polanco, Gordon, those guys all look good. And then Correa and Buxton are just great hitters. Jose Miranda is a top hitting prospect at 3,700 with multi-position eligibility. So I like the Twins here. I think it's pretty easy to get to their lineup as well because the only hitter in their projected lineup above 5K is Byron Buxton, who clearly deserves it.
Yeah, he certainly does. Didn't mean to accidentally expand this entire window to cover my entire screen, but we're all good now. I don't really have anything else here on either side of this one, Twins or Jays, other than I hope I'm playing the Blue Jays tonight.
Yeah, this game just really reminds me of the Atlanta and Mets game.
Yeah, it really does. Cardinals and Yankees, 3.9 run implied total for the Cards, 4.7 for the Yankees. Dakota Hudson and Nestor Cortez. No ownership going to Hudson. No ownership really going to Cortez. Second most expensive pitcher on the slate behind Dylan Cease. Cortez pretty much just looks like Valdez for me today. A tougher matchup. I actually have a little bit of Cortez even at the 2% ownership, but he's not someone that I'm going to try to pitch anybody for because he just looks way worse than Dylan Cease.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing I was saying about Valdez. Cortez has better strikeout stuff. 26% strikeout percentage is 4th highest on the slate. So you have that going for you, but he's also facing the Cardinals, which is just a really difficult matchup. Where I get to Cortez, it's just going to be a lineup where I have the salary and I don't want to take on Dylan Cease's ownership. So Cortez just lands in there, but that's not going to happen that frequently. I don't anticipate getting to much, if any of him. I think it's much more likely that I end up just either going Cease if I don't care about the ownership, or just going down to a different price range, getting an extra bat or two somewhere else.
Yeah, I ended up with 10% Cortez right now. I'm really curious to see if I end up with something in that neighborhood as we get closer, because I have a giant gap between him and Cease. I thought I only have Cortez by 0.5 of a point over Valdez, and I didn't get to Valdez, but I'm surprised Cortez was even jumping up there.
Yeah, I have them almost identical, Valdez and Cortez, but both 5 points behind Cease.
Yeah, same. I've got Cease at 20, Cortez at 15.8, and Valdez at 15.3. Let's talk bats. Yankees are 6th in our top stack tool, 14th in ownership. And the only guy that's getting any ownership here is Aaron Judge. Basically, everything that we said about Toronto, I think, is going to apply here for New York. Is probably in the same sort of boat as the Mets and the Braves, but just a better lineup. I would love to get to New York just because there's no ownership here.
Agreed. I don't think it's going to be that difficult to get to them just because there is enough mid-range pitching on the slate. They're expensive, but not that expensive. The only hitter in their lineup on DraftKings above 5K is Judge, and clearly he should be. Matt Carpenter's 4,900, which I have no idea what the hell to make of that. It's either, based on the last 3 years, it's the worst price ever, and based on this year, he's 3K underpriced. So play him in stacks, I guess. Not somebody I'd really be using as a one-off too often. But overall, it's just a spot where Dakota Hudson generally does a good job limiting power. 161 expected ISO to righties, 141 to lefties. But he just doesn't strike anybody out. And if you're going to let Aaron Judge and Rizzo and Torres and the corpse of Donaldson and Carpenter hit the ball, I'll certainly take my chances on what they're able to do with it. Also, it's weird that Benintendi's batting ninth. I don't know how that happened, but okay.
Weird.
Like Kiner Falefa's hitting seventh and Benintendi's hitting ninth.
Just making shit up as they go along.
Yeah.
Before the show started, I was basically getting 5 teams significantly more than I was getting anybody else. The Brewers, the Phillies, the Blue Jays, the Astros, and the Yankees. And I hope that continues. I love the idea of being well over the field on the Blue Jays, the Yankees, and Astros. I just feel like one of those teams is bound to be themselves today and do the thing that I'm expecting. And then the Phillies and Brewers, I just think look really good today by default. Can't get away from it.
And given the abundance of mid-range pitching, like it's one thing, I can't point at these guys in the 7 to 8K range really and say like, with the exception of, I guess, Lauer, and be like, oh, like I think this guy is very likely to do well. But there's just so many of them. There's going to be guys that get 15, 16, 17 DraftKings points in there. And so I like the idea, given that all of those guys exist, and again, I haven't made lineups yet, but at least thinking through the slate, I like the idea of getting to these low-owned, relatively expensive stacks that are like just legitimately good offenses. Yep. And like you said, one of them probably comes through and you're going to have enough pitchers that you can rotate through that they're going to look good, as opposed to, prioritizing value offenses and then hoping they outscore the Yankees and Astros and whoever else.
Right. Like the reason that the Yankees don't have the highest implied total on the slate is because they're playing in St. Louis. If this game were in New York, their run total is probably like 5.5, and they're one of the most popular teams on the slate because Dakota Hudson isn't anything special. But 90 park factor in St. Louis per StatCast for runs, like that's nerfing everything, and they're still, to me, looking good. So I love New York today. Easy to stack too. I mean, you get the MPE from LeMahieu. I haven't looked at the lineup, so I'm just going to assume that DJ LeMahieu's still in it. But
first third, yeah.
There we go. That helps. Just very easy to stack up and down. You even get that. You even get a lovely Benintendi in the 9-hole.
Yeah, I mean, you still can't go. You can't stack 1 through 5, which is annoying, but.
All right. Anything else? Cards and Yanks?
No.
All righty. Who here likes best ball? Raise your hands. Raise your hands by clicking that thumbs up and taking us up to 250. We're only 8 shy. I'll assume that you guys already put those thumbs up or your hands up. Underdog has launched the Puppy 3 Best Ball Contest for the 2022 season. We want you to go ahead and hop in it, and we've got a little bit of help for you. For $1, you'll get a week's access to our best ball kit through Sunday, August 7th. That is $9 off the weekly price. You get our best ball and season-long fantasy football rankings, Underdog daily draft rankings. You get a best ball stacking guide, cheat sheets, articles, and more. All you have to do to activate this offer, click the link in the description of this video. Use the promo code PUPPY3, PUPPY, the number 3. You can see it on the screen right now to get 90% off. 90% off a weekly best ball draft kit package. Just take advantage. Subscribe to the fantasy football channel. Subscribe to the best ball channel. I think that's the fantasy football and best ball channel. I'm just reading that poorly because you're going to get a ton of content in the season long and best ball space. Don't miss out on any of it. We crank out so much content. It is ridiculous. It would be easy to miss. That's why you should subscribe to those channels. 3 to go, Adam.
So somebody, DFIC just mentioned it in chat. I was seeing and hearing the same thing. Baltimore weather seems to be going from not really an issue at the beginning of the show to definitely something to keep an eye on.
All right. I'm going to not pay attention to Baltimore weather at all, and then I'm just going to ask you what I should be doing. If you don't get it right, you and I have problems.
Yeah, so typically I get weather wrong, so good luck.
Amazing. How do you succeed at anything if you can't look at your window?
Well, I live 2 miles from the stadium, so.
Very different climates.
When you're talking about thunderstorms, yeah. The Orioles have been in a rain delay where it is pouring, and it is not raining in my apartment.
Rain in dollars, maybe.
Yeah.
Diamondbacks and Rockies. 4.2 run implied total for the Diamondbacks, 3.9 for the Rockies. Madison Bumgarner and Erman Marquez. Bumgarner actually 7% owned here. Marquez not owned. I think the more likely scenario is that I roster none of these guys.
I kind of like both pitchers. I like them both as pit. What?
You like Bumgarner on
Yeah.
a 13-game slate? Go for it. Floor's
I
yours.
had Bumgarner optimal like 10% of the time at 6% owned.
Go ahead.
He's facing the Rockies outside of Coors, no Chris Bryant. I think the middle of the order. I mean, it's not a great strikeout matchup. You know, Iglesias, Cron, Rogers, Grichuk. These guys all can do damage, but he's only 6,200. The Rockies only have a 4 implied run total. Bumgarner's not getting any ownership. 7% ownership compared to Gibson at 16%. I do like him as a pivot away from Gibson. And the same goes for German Marquez, who is projected for like 2% ownership, basically the same top 2 percentage as Gibson and 1/8 the ownership.
He came out of my top pitcher tool 3%, 18% K rate via steamer against a 19% aggregate Rockies. Even if we want to bump that bad boy up because they're outside of course, I was like that shock. I never expected you to say that, particularly on this slate.
I have him with the 6th highest optimal percentage amongst pitchers on DraftKings.
Something's broke. You would rather have Madison Bumgarner over Mitch Keller?
What'd you say?
Bumgarner over Keller?
Yeah.
Drunk, man.
So what I think personally, no. What I'm going to end up doing and what the spreadsheet says, yes.
Fair. German Marquez is what. Well, I guess you like him more than Cease.
I mean, I like Marquez as a pivot. The fact that he's $1,100 more than Bumgarner made him look not quite as good.
Yeah, for sure. Diamondbacks are 10th in ownership. Rockies are 18th. Neither one of them ranking all that highly in top stack. This seems like a game that I'm just going to basically have nothing. Hitters, pitchers, across the board, very, very, very minimal exposure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a little bit higher on the pitchers. I do like that middle of the Rockies order. It scares me for Bumgarner, the Iglesias, Cron, Rogers, Grichuk part. But on a 13-game slate, I doubt I get to too much of it. And Baltimore is starting to look ugly.
Starting to look ugly.
I can actually, so I guess it's East, just downpour, but not raining where I'm at.
From my perspective, Baltimore has looked ugly on a daily basis for like 4 years.
I lived in Bowie for some of that, so it didn't count.
Fair. That joke still stands.
Yeah, this is actually kind of crazy. So like to my left, it's sunny. And then where I'm at, it's just like these dark storm clouds rolling in. But then like I can see far enough into the distance that I can just see like the downpour like that maybe I'm going to be getting in 5 minutes.
Is it moving towards the stadium or away from the stadium?
It's probably like over the stadium right now. It's coming from the stadium. So just like,
okay.
The sun is further away from the stadium than I am.
Okay.
The stadium's like directly.
No kidding. The sun is like how many million miles away, man? What are you talking about?
The stadium's directly to my right. The sunny part is to my left, and the clouds are coming from my right.
Okay. Well, the Mariners are coming up next, taking on the Angels. 4-run implied total there for Seattle. 2.9 for the Angels. Robbie Ray and Patrick Sandoval. Robbie Ray, when I grabbed ownership at the beginning of the show, I assume we're going to be in the same sort of ballpark. 60% owned today at 8,900. Sandoval, not to be undone, still 11% owned. Every bit of Robbie Ray's ownership today, basically no matter what the number ends up being, is correct or at worst under-owned. He is the very clear, without a shadow of a doubt, best pitching option. If you don't play Robbie Ray in cash today, never play DFS again. Unless you're sending us the head-to-heads.
Yeah, pretty much. I just have no argument to get away from him. Obviously, he's getting a ton of ownership, and in individual lineups, you can save some ownership by getting away. But like we had talked about before, I'm typically just going to get away from popular bats before I get away from Ray. It's only one spot in my lineup. It's not a big deal. Great strikeout matchup. The Angels are just terrible. You know, Ohtani's really good. Ward is good, but tons of strikeouts in this lineup. Not a lot of good hitters. Ray has the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate. He's in a great pitcher's park. If he pitches poorly here, you just got unlucky, basically.
Yeah. I'm just going to pretend like he doesn't exist on this slate. He's just going to be in most of the shit that I'm doing, and like I'll just figure it out later. It's the no-brainer of all no-brainers today. What about Sandoval? 7,500, 10% owned. He was a bit more owned earlier today. Now that ownership doesn't appear to be there. How are you feeling here?
I'm kind of surprised the ownership disappeared. I think he looks good, and I like him more than I did this morning just because the ownership has come down. He's only $500 more expensive than Gibson, but he has a strikeout percentage that's 6 points higher. 3.77 xFIP is half a run better. He's in a favorable pitcher's park as opposed to Philadelphia. He's getting the Mariners without Julio Rodriguez. I really like Sandoval here, especially with the ownership coming down.
I don't have him for some reason, even though I expected to, but I think he looks great. So it appears that I'm not going to get there based on the data, but I personally would like to get him. He's my inverse Madison Bumgarner. Angels are not getting any. Go ahead.
I will get there. I like him on FanDuel too, just because the one pitcher site drives down the ownership. I mean, you can very safely say that Sandoval's not going to pull much ownership there since it's all going to go to Ray and Cease. But he's still got a legitimate ceiling and looks good at a cheaper price tag.
We don't have to talk about the Angels bats. It's like one person in the industry that's going to play them. He just happens to work here. And he'll probably win it too. Seattle bats, not really getting any love. 21st in top stack, 22nd in ownership. I don't need that either.
Yeah, I'm good.
And then we close it out. Dodgers and Padres, 4.7 run implied total for the Dodgers, 3.9 for the Pods. Tony Gonsolin and Sean Manaea. Neither guy getting any ownership. Both guys in the mid nines. I just don't know how you can justify their salaries today, particularly because they have to face each other from a hitting perspective. Dodgers bats, exceptional. Padres bats, exceptional.
Agreed. I just have a really difficult time getting to them. I throw them in the Cortez and Valdez range where they're good pitchers, but tough matchup, correctly priced in terms of, like if you were talking matchup agnostic. So it's just really tough to want to get to either one.
I would love to go to this game. Like incredible offense, good pitcher in Gonsolin, good pitcher in Sean Manaea. Like this is the kind of matchup I would like to go check out.
Yeah, it would be fun.
No ownership coming to the Padres bats right now. No real ownership coming to the Dodgers, although Trey Turner and Will Smith popping a little bit here. Is this a spot where you want to get to the offenses, or is the problem here that like the pitchers are probably a bit better than we saw in those other matchups?
I think it's kind of the Toronto, Minnesota, Atlanta, New York games. I do like the Dodgers a little bit more than the Padres, but they're both similar in that they're facing good pitchers, but they also just have a lot of good hitters. Manaea this year has a lot of 171 expected ISO to righties, so it does set up relatively well for Mookie Betts, Trey Turner, Will Smith, Chris Taylor at 3,800, but they're also really expensive. So you're taking a team against a good pitcher, and then you're also sacrificing elsewhere in your lineup most likely. On the Padres side, pretty much the same thing. Not as expensive as the Dodgers, but still not cheap. So I don't anticipate getting to a ton of either one, but I would get to the offenses before the pitching most likely.
Alrighty, sum it up. Favorite pitchers for today?
Robbie Ray, Dylan Cease, Eric Lauer, Patrick Sandoval.
Give me some Corey Kluber. I think he's getting slept on pretty aggressively today. Love him at low ownership. Top stacks.
Houston, Yankees, Milwaukee, probably Kansas City, even though I don't actually think that's the answer.
Brewers, Phillies, Blue Jays, Astros, and Yankees for me. That'll do it, folks. We hit the mark. 45 seconds to spare. 270 likes, 930 viewers. Get it up to 300 while we transition over to MLB Live Before Lock. Thank you for joining us, guys. Good luck tonight. Thank you to OddShopper for sponsoring. We'll talk to you again later. Don't go anywhere. Stay on this stream. Live Before Lock is next.
What's going on, everybody? Eric Lindquist at Stokastic here on the OddShopper channel, coming to you with my 3 favorite prize picks here for Friday, August 5th. Hit that like button, subscribe button, and notification bell, but really hit that thumbs up. That goes a long way for us here at the OddShopper channel. Plus, use promo code AWESOMO. Yes, still promo code AWESOMO to get up to a first deposit bonus of $100 over at PrizePicks right now. You put in 100, you get 100. You put in 20, you get 20. Like, it's going to be great no matter what you do. So no matter what your bankroll is, take advantage of that offer with promo code AWESEMO. All right. I know last week was incredible. The week before, from the All-Star break, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we had 5 straight winners. We went 2 of 3, and then we went 4 of 4 to finish it out on Friday. And then this week happened. It's been a train wreck. And these things happen in swings. I don't even know what to say. Yesterday, you couldn't have even just faded my 3 picks because we still went over with Alvarez. He ended up going over his fantasy score. It just didn't end up being a long ball. And Justin Verlander went completely nuts here. But you know what I'm going to do to start off my card? We continue to do the things that have been working. We don't stop now. And there is one pitcher on this slate that I want to see fry. I want to see him fry, and we're going to go to pitcher fantasy score. I could do the under of strikeouts too, but probably less ideal than this. I want the under of 32.5 fantasy points for Jose Berrios in his return to Minnesota. Man, well, he's been there a couple times already in pitch, but whatever. This is going to be a massive, massive game here, and you've got right next to him Tyler Mahle, the new shiny toy here for the Minnesota Twins. I love the over of him. So I want to let it be known. I had to try to decide what I wanted to do. I wanted to get the over for 24.5 and the under for Jose Berrios. So here's what I'm going to say. Put this with my home run pick and the player that, is going to be attached to it. And that shouldn't be much of a surprise here, but I like both of these plays so much. You know what? Screw it. We're just going to add them both. I want one pitcher. I don't want the other. This is going to be just an incredible showdown. As a Minnesota Twins fan, I can't remember a game that I've been this excited for. We got a starting pitcher on the at the trade deadline that might actually be good. And 24.5 is disrespectful.
What is going on, everybody? Almost time for the weekend, but first, we got to bet on some baseball. So like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you've not done so already. Today's show is sponsored by OddShopper. I'm here with Terry McBride, T McB, Digital B21 over on Twitter. We're going to be breaking down today's slate. Terry, how are you doing? And you got anything fun planned for the weekend?
Doing pretty good, bud. Going to be doing a bunch of shows over the weekend. I think I'm on tomorrow and Sunday. So I'll be doing just a lot of baseball DFS and then, just hanging out. I don't think anything crazy is going on. Might go see Bullet Train. Looks like a pretty fun ride of a movie, but overall, nothing crazy. Not this weekend. Had a nice time at a barbecue last weekend. Little fun in the sun kind of a thing, but yeah, quiet one. How about you?
So I have my sister did an internship overseas for the summer and she's in college. So I haven't really gotten to see her much this summer, but she came home a couple days ago and she's going to be hanging out, staying here for the next couple weeks before she goes back to school. So that's all good. That's going to be fun. Going to have a party here this weekend, actually tying into that. So my brother yesterday, we're trying to figure out what we want to do to set up, get ready for people coming over or whatnot. So my brother goes out, he buys a new bong. And we go out, we tested it last night. It works. All right. So we've got all that situated. And after we use it for the first time, my brother breaks it and drops it. So it was good. It was fun. It was fun while it lasted. We got one good use out of it, and back to the drawing board. But yeah, all should be good here.
Nice.
Yeah, my family.
Every now and then I get tempted with those, with like spending money on a new piece and like something nice and like, one of those barns with an ice chamber and all the different shit and all the fancy stuff. And it's always like that. It always just breaks within, a couple of weeks. It's like, yeah, I guess that was fun while I had it, but I'm kind of done with that. I just grab bowls over at the bodega now.
My dog has broke triple the amount of bongs monetarily than he cost, and it is a terrible thing. He will just run through, hit a table, and then I'm like, oh, there's like $150 I didn't want.
Poor Bruce doesn't know you're doing like a cost benefit analysis on the whole thing here with his life. My God.
You know what you need to figure out how to do, Tyler? Because remember back in the days when we were in high school, where everything could be fashioned into some sort of makeshift paraphernalia. The solution here is you have to figure out a way to smoke out of Bruce. All right, like after you figure that out, everything's good. He's not going to break himself, at least hopefully not. And then we've got it all figured out. We've got baseball to talk about today.
Carbon is right here, bro.
Yeah, we've got some baseball to talk about here also. I think what a lot of people are going to be asking us about is the weather. Terry, I know that you are amongst us, I would say the most qualified to talk about weather, although it's not really saying much. It's just, we're both just Googling, looking at the radar maps and whatnot. We do have a couple of games with rain in the air. The only one that's really of concern to me is Pittsburgh, Baltimore. But it does look like there's an opening later on where it should be pretty clear should they choose to wait out the rain. But I want to know, is that game a concern for you? And are there any other games that you're eyeing as well?
So, I mean, fortunately, it's an Orioles Pirates game. So it's like, if we lose it, we lose it. I did think that there was a little bit of, some maybe interest in grabbing some shares of Dean Kramer, actually, oddly. But I wasn't really going to go there. Same story with Mitch Keller. I thought there was a little bit of interest in him, but not really going to cry about losing those shares off of this slate. So if it scratches, it scratches. Like you said, it does look like there's a little window where they might be able to start playing baseball for a couple of hours, and hopefully the game closes out. But there's more rain coming later in the night. So it's a little dicey in that spot. I wasn't really wild about the bats in this one anyway. Looked like there was plenty of thunder and lightning going on when we were talking to Adam between the shows. He was like, glancing out his window like that. So, it's kind of one to keep an eye on as we approach lock, I think. But I probably wouldn't be rostering these pitchers at this point. Like I said, I would have had, maybe onesie, twosie kind of shares of each of them. So I'm probably taking them off the board. Hitters, if they're trickling in, just keep an eye on it and have a plan to swap out later on as we get to lock, if anything goes haywire. And otherwise, I didn't really see any other ones that I was overly concerned with. Did you have one in mind?
I mean, there's some games with weather in the mix, like Washington, Philly. We saw what happened there yesterday. There's potential rain in the forecast. Atlanta, New York also. It's, kind of by us. There's a chance of some thunderstorms tonight. Like we have that. We've gotten almost no rain in Terry and I's area for the last few weeks. It's just 100 degrees every day. And now it's starting to be thunderstorms rolling through. Like if you look at the 10-day forecast, like a chance of storms every night, but nothing's going to cause me to take players out of my pool. The Pittsburgh-Baltimore game, I think I might just be risk averse and just take it out from this standpoint. It's not a game I like all that much anyway. So like, why does it matter? Why am I going to try to roll the dice on something I don't really have interest in playing anyway?
Right. Yeah. How many shares of the Orioles or the Pirates was I really looking to push in here? So with a bunch of other options on the table, I don't mind sacrificing. And I'm just looking, I have my sort up here and it looks like, I got about 1% of the Orioles in here. So I just need to zero some guys out if I need to change that. The Pirates are at 2%. So again, just need to knock those out. And that's across, the top couple hundred. So even in the top 150, God knows what's actually there. But I do need to improve some shares of the Brewers here because they're not coming up enough for me.
I have a bet on the Brewers today, over 2.5 runs in the first 5 innings. We'll talk more about the pitching situation and Duggar is on the mound for the Reds in a little bit, but the only player that was really popping up meaningfully from this game was Marcano, just because he's batting leadoff for the Pirates today. He's min price on DK, so he was pretty easy to fit into some of my stacks, but it's a massive slate. There's a lot of games. There's a lot of spots to choose from. Could one individual hitter from that game end up hitting 2 home runs and screw us? I guess. Is that the most likely outcome? No, not really. So I'll be taking my chances elsewhere, and we'll be talking about some more of those stacks and whatnot in a little bit, but first, we're going to start at the pitchers here, Terry. And to say the least, the ownership is concentrated at pitching. It is a big slate. 13 games. So in theory, a lot of pitchers to choose from. Like there's a lot of names on the board, but in terms of viable ones, the field isn't really seeing it. So we have Robbie Ray, who by the way has had a fairly disappointing season. 44% owned on FanDuel. This is the highest I can remember any pitcher being owned on a slate of this size all season. And on DK, he's 58% owned. Dylan Cease, 33%. Eric Lauer, 34%. So I'm going to just start by asking you a broad question about this slate. Do you like the chalk at pitching?
I get the chalk at pitching. I get why the field is there. I do like the opportunity. I think it's a good spot. I think you're talking about with Robbie Ray, a high strikeout pitcher against a team that has a decently high strikeout rate. But not with all that ownership. I mean, that's the concern for me. So I will be definitely getting to some shares of Robbie Ray, Dylan Cease in that same bag, Eric Lauer in that same bag, but both lower owned. I'll get shares of all three of those guys, but I can spread some of that out and grab some shares of like a Patrick Sandoval, a Corey Kluber in a good spot, some Nestor Cortez, even though I hate that spot against the Cards. I think even Tyler Mahle could be interesting with his strikeout acumen. Framber Valdez. There are pitchers that I like on this slate that are just way under owned by comparison. Herman Marquez against the Diamondbacks here even is popping up nicely for me. So I'm happy to spread some of those shares out. I don't need to have, everybody's heard me say over the course of the entire season, I don't trust Robbie Ray. So if the entire field is going to be there, if 45% of the field is going to be on him on FanDuel, give my usual 15 to 20. And I'm got plenty of Robbie Ray. I'm happy with that. I'm well below the field and I'm spreading out to options that the field isn't taking. So yeah, I get it. I understand why people are going there, but I am nowhere near as enthusiastic about it. And the other thing about it is the Angels, their strikeout rate against righties is the worst in the league, 27%. Against lefties, 22.3%. They're right around league average. They're 16th in baseball. That's dead middle of the league. So that's for the active roster. We're not talking about an egregiously bad strikeout rate. Robbie Ray, very good pitcher, but they're decent at not striking out against lefties. Some of that does get soaked up around, the guys with a 5% type strikeout rate, like the Fletchers of the world. But there are, some decent hitters in here that can limit strikeouts a little bit against lefties. So maybe not as appealing a spot, but Robbie Ray is my top projected pitcher. There is a good reason that all the ownership is going there. Long-winded answer.
Yeah, no. So in terms of Robbie Ray, let's start with the clear thing here. Cash games, he's still the choice, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, no doubt about it. It just, even as just like a blocker to all that ownership from the field that he'll be getting there, I think it just makes sense. And
yeah,
the price,
so
obviously
FanDuel for sure, one pitcher site still going Robbie Ray. He's gonna be like 70% on cash games probably on FanDuel. DK, Robbie Ray is also an easy SP1 to get to. Now, in terms of your second favorite chalk pitching option, and this is going to be a little bit more of a DK-centric question for you, Terry, but if you had to pick a second pitcher to roster for cash games on DK, would you lean towards Dylan Cease on the road against the Texas Rangers or Eric Lauer at home against the Reds?
I mean, it's an interesting question because you're talking about a different leverage situation and a different price situation. If you go Lowry, you're basically getting two mid-market type pitchers with Robbie Ray coming in at 8,900, Lauer at 8,000. Let me make sure. Yeah, that's the DK page. So that makes some sense because then you're going to have a ton of money to spend on big bats. You can get Padres, Dodgers, Yankees, whoever the hell you want bats wise. But Dylan Cease rates out a little bit higher in terms of our top 2 percentage. He projects higher for me in my model. He's coming up a little bit lower owned, like a percentage point lower owned, but relative to his probability of success, that rates out to a better leverage score. So between the two of those chalky pitchers, I think I would probably lean Cease and just look at him as like my pay up pitcher and Robbie Ray as the discount pitcher, if that's the way that you were going. By that same token, I also just like using Cease or even using Lauer as just your number one, and then going to, let's say like a Framber or a Tyler Mahle, some of these other guys that I mentioned as your SP2, and putting those combos together. So, if we're talking just, hey, Robbie Ray and one of the other chalk pitchers, I would probably just lean into Ray and Cease and take the slightly lower owned, better leverage situation from a guy that I expect to deliver slightly more often.
So my answer is Cease. The reason is just going to be because of security. Have you looked at some of these recent starts in this run that Dylan Cease is on? If you're talking about safety, there's nobody with a higher floor than Dylan Cease right now. Dylan Cease has not had a start where he's given up more than one earned run since May 24th. All and the strikeouts are always there for this guy as well.
Yeah.
Like there's the one start against
artist.
Yeah, not every time does he strike out 10 or hitters or anything like that, but for the most part, he's pretty consistently at least at 7 or 8 or something like that. And yeah, he's not allowed multiple earned runs in a start in over 2 months. It's been 2.5 months since this guy has allowed multiple earned runs in a start, which is also I kind of think he's getting slept on for Cy Young a little bit. I know the odds have started to adjust a little bit. I bet him at plus 1,100 and plus 850 a week
Nice.
and 2 weeks ago. And now, I mean, to me, it's pretty clear. Verlander's 1, I think Cease is 2, McClanahan's 3. It seems like those 3 are heading for Cy Young finalists unless there's an injury or something really crazy happens. But the point I was asking here, it was about cash games, and I just think there's so much security with Cease. And something else I'll add also about this slate overall, I think Ray is picking up too much ownership, and I think Cease isn't getting enough considering how weak the pitching options are on this slate. Not that 32% is a low number for him on DK, but I think he should be more popular than Robbie Ray. And then over on FanDuel, sure, he's more expensive than Ray, but Ray shouldn't be 3x the ownership of Cease. If you run this slate on multiple times, I think that Cease ends up being a better pitcher more often than not. So I think there's a big ownership gap that isn't warranted. So I know a lot of people are going to say, like, I think it was Larry C mentioned in chat, how much Robbie Ray is too much Robbie Ray. Honestly, I'd be inclined to play closer to like 30% of Robbie Ray and then get to the kind of ownership on Cease that Ray is currently projected for, at least for DraftKings purposes. And then for FanDuel, I'd probably just flip it. Ray in the mid 40s, Cease at 15%. I would just flip the ownership on those 2 pitchers. That's what I feel good about in tournaments.
Yeah, I love that spot on FanDuel for Cease. I'm definitely going to be hitting that pretty hard. 15% is too low. I'll get that up over 20. I probably won't go the direct flip where I'm getting like 45% of Cease. Because like I said, I do want to spread out some shares of pitching to $7,000 Kyle Gibson against the Nationals. I'm not really worried about that Nationals lineup. Not like Gibson's any good, but if some of these other options go pop, like if Robbie Ray has his bumpy start, if Cease just delivers an okay start, or if their ownership is there, or just the price difference that you're getting, 3,900, I can do quite a bit. That's a full premium bat on the FanDuel slate. So I don't think I want to go to like the 40% level on Dylan Cease, but I definitely want to get above that field level 15.8% on FanDuel there. I like that spot a lot. You're going up against the Texas lineup that is middle of the league, basically against righties. 3.22% home run rate is their best feature. That ranks 10th in baseball. A 105 WRC plus puts them 13th. 21.3% strikeout rate, 159 ISO against righties. So right in the middle of the league for those stats. It's not an incredibly targetable team, but Dylan Cease is a very good pitcher. Like you were saying, 33.3% strikeout rate on the season, a 3.02 xFIP, a 2.01 ERA to go with that. Doesn't allow any kind of hard hit, 31.9% hard hit, 1.86% home run rate. So I like that Dylan Cease side of that equation a lot. I think he's going to shut down this Rangers team.
Yeah. And the only other real chalk pitcher, I guess to an extent, we'll talk about Kyle Gibson after this, is picking up some ownership. It's crazy that we have a slate with nearly every single team in the league playing, and there's 3.5 pitchers picking up ownership. The other one is Eric Lauer, and this is more so on DK than FanDuel, where he's going to be 34% owned. He's 8,000 on DK. That's really driving up the ownership, whereas on FanDuel at $9,700, about appropriately priced 9.2% ownership. I do view Eric Lauer as typically not being somebody I would ever want to pay a $9,700 price tag for him, but such is the outlook of the slate where we're so limited on pitchers that you almost feel kind of forced, like, if I build a bunch of lineups, Eric Lauer just pops up in some of them. But what do you make of Eric Lauer, who I also think is a little bit overowned today?
I agree with that. I think he's a little bit overowned here on the DK slate, at least when he's pulling 30%. The price is good. 8,000 for him. That's acceptable going up against a Reds team that is not any good. 24.3% strikeout rate for Lauer over the course of the season, a 4.09 xFIP. He's not the dynamite guy that we saw come out of the gate early this season, but he's a good serviceable pitcher with a little bit of strikeout upside. So I don't think that he'll go out and have a clunker of a start here or anything, but with all that weight of ownership, I would probably just look to spread out to some different options from him. It's not my favorite spot. He doesn't project out amazingly well comparatively. He's just kind of another guy in the middle of the field with some of those other names I've thrown out there. Like, I don't see that much daylight between him and Patrick Sandoval on this slate. So I'd just rather get away from the weight of ownership on Lauer. At 9.8% on FanDuel for 9,700, I don't think you really have that same issue to wrestle with, but you're paying up. So you're sacrificing a part of a bat there to get to Lauer. 10%, if I fall right around the field on FanDuel, I wouldn't be surprised and I wouldn't be unhappy.
Yeah, I think that all totally makes sense. And he clearly has a big difference on DK compared to FanDuel. He's got, 3.5x the ownership on DraftKings. There's also a difference in price, which really drives that. And we have to roster 2 pitchers on DK, all that. But either way, I think Lauer's a pitcher who I feel pretty comfortable coming in underweight to the field on his ownership. And same goes for Robbie Ray. And if people are playing them in chat, which I know a lot of people are, they're both really popular pitchers today. It's not an issue for me. I think that for single entry, I'm probably going to go with Robbie Ray and Dylan Cease as my pitchers, and then just differentiate a little bit at offense. But in terms of large field tournaments, when you're playing a bunch of lineups, I would most likely want to be overweight to the field on Dylan Cease, and then just underweight to Robbie Ray and Eric Lauer per their current projected ownership. Like, I just don't get to 60% of Robbie Ray when I'm running my lineups, nor do I get to 35% of Eric Lauer. I think that something like 25% Lauer and then somewhere in the neighborhood of the mid 30-ish percentage or something like that on Robbie Ray, that's something I feel more comfortable with in terms of my lineups. But here's now what we need to figure out, Terry.
Okay.
If we're not going to just jam in the 3 most popular pitchers, which you and I are not as inclined to do, who are the contrarian pitchers that actually have a chance to have upside on this slate? Because we have some very shitty options.
Yeah, they're not exactly amazing names. Some of them are talented pitchers who just aren't the best DFS options, like guys like Framber Valdez. I think he's a very talented pitcher. He's amazing at keeping the ball on the ground. He can find strikeouts from time to time, but it's not the greatest matchup for strikeout upside going up against the Guardians. There are some high strikeout rate guys packed into that lineup in the back end in spots, but there's also some premium low end bats in the low strikeout rate bats there. I do think he's got some upside though. Tons of leverage on the DK slate where he's 2% owned, 11.6% probable to be a top 2. He's our 4th ranked by probability. So I think that's a great spot just out of the gate. Just grab some shares of Framber. He's not cheap, 9,900. That's probably too much to pay for his DFS, his DFS upside in general. But I think it's a good spot just given that ownership, given that leverage. Nestor, I mentioned earlier, I just hate the matchup. The Cardinals against lefties all season long have been the best offensive spot in baseball. So I think that's one to just kind of avoid. Nestor came back to earth a little bit. He's still been very good, serviceable starter for the Yanks. But DFS wise, I don't know that you're going to get that ceiling game out of Nestor here that many times over. If we run this 1,000 times, how many times is he, cracking through for a 50-point game on a FanDuel scoring wise against this elite Cardinals lineup? So I don't love that spot, but it's on the board again, low owned, positively leveraged, and it ranks out well. Tyler Mahle, similar against Toronto, but you don't pay the premium in price. And there's, again, not going to be that many people there. Positively leveraged by a good margin, single digit ownership, only 8,700, premium strikeout upside. Patrick Sandoval, right there as well. I mentioned him. He projects out nicely for me. He's only 7,500. So there are guys, as much as these aren't maybe, some of them aren't necessarily household names, like Patrick Sandoval, 24.2% strikeout rate this year. He walks too many guys, 10.2% walk rate, 3.77 xFIP, a 1.48 whip. These are like good one, bad one, good one, bad one as we go through it. But he doesn't allow home runs, doesn't give up a ton of power. He's going up against a Mariners team that's, decidedly fairly middle of the road, I think here. So I think there's upside for Sandoval at very low ownership and pretty low price. There's a lot of guys like that on this board. It's like we've got the couple premium guys and then a broad mid-range. Yeah. Tony Gonsolin could succeed against the Padres. I don't like his chances, but he could. Mad Bum, you heard Adam talk about it earlier, could certainly succeed against that Rockies team and just have one of those weird Mad Bum starts. I'm not going to it. I don't think it's going to happen, but I can see it. And he's super cheap and low owned. So there's a lot of spots like that to just, kind of weave in and out of your super chalky pitchers.
Yeah. So reading off the ownership on DK, and once again, massive slate. Nearly every single team is playing today. We have is it 13 or 14 games? It is. Yeah. So 13 game slate. So we got 26 pitchers to choose from. Of those 26 pitchers, Cease and Lauer, both in the mid 30% range. Robbie Ray, nearly 60% on DK. We've got Kyle Gibson at 15%. Not a single pitcher is picking up more than 10% ownership other than that. It's crazy. It's so spread out a pitcher because the options are kind of lacking. And that's why I think we see a super chat, like from our guy, my filler arc here, starts. Hey guys, I hate baseball. Robbie Ray plus Corey Kluber. What do you think for DK? So Robbie Ray, if you're mixing Robbie Ray with a pitcher like Corey Kluber, that ownership becomes much less problematic because now you're going with a lower owned SP2 where Corey Kluber at 5% ownership. I love the play. Kluber is $8,200 on DK, picking up 5% ownership. On FanDuel, Corey Kluber is 8,800 and projected for 2% ownership. We've seen this all year. There's nothing more favorable for a starting pitcher than being a righty going up against the Detroit Tigers. They suck against righties. They strike out a lot. There's not really any danger to be had in terms of power. The most dangerous bat you have in there, I guess, I would say Javi Baez against the lefty. But I don't even know at this point in his career, like Javi Baez is just a total wild card at this point. So I think that the Corey Kluber is certainly some of this getting slept on. I like where your head is at, my fellow Arc. What do you make of that pitching combination, Terry? Robbie Ray, Corey Kluber.
I like it a lot, actually. Kluber was one of the first guys that when I dropped my sword in before, I gave kind of a little nudge because I wasn't getting as much of him as I want. 1.2% owned on FanDuel for 8,800, 5.3% for only 8,200. Like you just said, this has been one of the best go-to matchups for right-handed pitching all season long. The Tigers this year, 30th ranked against righties with a 107 ISO, 30th ranked with a 69 WRC plus, 31% worse than average creating runs against right-handed pitching, 30th ranked with a 1.83% home run rate against right-handed pitching, 25th with a 24.1%. Corey Kluber is talented enough and still has enough in the tank that he can go out and find a few additional strikeouts here. He's 21.6% strikeout rate, right around league average for the season, but we've seen him bounce up in strikeouts and hit a couple strikeout ceilings over the course of the season. He keeps you safe as well. 3.7% walk rate, doesn't put any extra guys on base, minimizes power, 2.52% home run rate, only an 87.1 mile an hour average exit velo allowed. So Kluber, very talented veteran pitcher. Throw him against this Tigers lineup at low ownership. I love that play.
Yeah, and I'm going to do a little comparison here on Kluber and just really drive home the point of why I think he's such a good GPP play. So the price difference between Corey Kluber and Eric Lauer over on DK. Lauer is $8,000. Kluber is $8,200. It's a wash, right? Like the $200. What are you doing with that money? Eric Lauer this year has a 4.02 expected ERA. Corey Kluber this year has a 4.02 expected ERA. The exact same number. The strikeout rate for Kluber is 21.6%. The strikeout rate for Eric Lauer, admittedly, is higher, 24.3, a few percentage points higher. But then factor in the matchup. Not that the Reds are a difficult matchup for Eric Lauer. That is very far from the case. But it's not as easy of a matchup as what the Reds are. So all things considered, I don't think there's that much of a difference between Eric Lauer and Corey Kluber in terms of just expected output today. Yet we've got one of them at 5% ownership and one of them at 34% ownership. So given all that information laid out, I think that's a really good pivot to make from Lauer over to Corey Kluber.
Yeah, that's actually a great comp. I think that was a really good call there by you, just putting those two on the table side by side there. It makes a ton of sense to shift some of that ownership over. And as you pointed out, the difference in strikeout rate that they've put up for the season is more than made up for by the matchup there. Kluber has an opportunity for an aggressive strikeout game here. So I like that a lot.
All right. So we just got the official rain delay here. The Pirates Orioles game is delayed. It's not going to start on time. I just pulled up, if you guys look in the YouTube chat, I used the old, the weather command there, which unfortunately had to ban from the chat because you guys abused him a little bit. You guys were burning out the weather bot. But we've got right there the weather. Doesn't really give us any relevant information, but it's up there in the chat anyway. I was hoping to give us some sort of percentage chance of rain. I forgot exactly how it works there, but yeah. So what does the game being delayed impact your view of the situation? I'm just not going to have it in my player pool. We talked about it a little bit at the top. There's a lot of other spots to get to, and I'll just look elsewhere than force myself to play a spot I don't like all that much anyway.
Yeah, in the 2 minutes that you before you brought that up, while I was talking about whatever we were just talking about, I was in the process of taking that game out of my model, out of my sword here anyway. I'm not going out of my way to put it back in. So I guess maybe if you think about it in terms of if you really wanted to go there, you think about it in terms of they didn't just PPD it, they're going to try and delay and catch that window that we were talking about. Maybe that means it's more likely to play or at least to start, but it's just not a spot I wanted to go to anyway for bats. I was a little bit more interested in the pitching, and that doesn't bring me back to the pitching. So I'm content with leaving it out.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. I think it would be a harder decision point if it was like, the Robbie Ray or Dylan Cease is in a game with weather concerns. This one is just like, I wasn't going to play this game much anyway, so who gives a shit? We take it out. We move on to other things. But I want to finish up the pitcher talk. Well, first, just broad sense, are there any pitchers we've not talked about yet that you really would like to bring to the people's attention?
am having a hard time getting Ian Anderson out of my life here. He projects a little bit well through my model just based on some of last year's numbers, but I hate the spot. I hate the matchup. It kind of burnt me last night with Kyle Wright, so maybe I've got a little bit of that lingering in here against the Mets. 20.2% strikeout rate, a 4.16 xFIP, a 1.50 whip for Ian Anderson this year, just walking way too many people at 11%. Doesn't allow a ton of power. As like a super low on guy, if you wanted to grab a few shares, I think it's okay, but I'm working on carving him out of my life in terms of the overall across 150 here. I've got way too much of them, but is just based on how he's projecting through here, I guess he was worth mentioning. We touched on Kyle Gibson, but I don't know that we actually really talked him through all that much. 18.6% strikeout rate, a 4.20 xFIP. He does induce an 11.1% swinging strike rate, 3.33% home run rate. He's just going up against a pretty lousy Nationals lineup here. So I do think there's a little bit on the bone for Kyle Gibson at 7,000 on both sites. He's drawing more ownership than I would like, even around the 20% range on DK. That's not egregious. You can be there and be comfortable, but it's a little bit more than I wanted to see on it. I kind of thought it would sneak through a little bit better. 8.1% on FanDuel, kind of similar story. I was hoping he'd be more in the 2-3% range, and I could be in the 8% range. I don't know if I want to go to like 15% Kyle Gibson to try and grab a big advantage on that ownership. So I'll probably just have my odd shares here and there.
I'm curious to ask you something. The bet doesn't exist anymore. I was looking over at OddShopper, which sponsored today's show. If you guys haven't checked out OddShopper, you know the deal. Go check it. It's free to use. If you're placing player prop bets, at the very least, you should check OddShopper just to make sure you're getting the best price, because it's going to compare all the odds at different books, and using our MLB projections is going to give you an expected ROI and an expected win rate on each individual prop bet. And it makes a big difference whether you're getting a number at, say, like plus 110 or minus 110. That's a huge difference over the course of time. But the reason I'm bringing this up right now is early in the day, I bet the over on Ian Anderson's strikeouts. Now, at first glance, I think he's pitching against the Mets. There's no way this is a good idea, but it was plus money at over 3.5. So I want to ask you, how many strikeouts do you have Ian Anderson projected for? Because I was looking at his numbers and I'm like, do I like Ian Anderson this year? No, not particularly, but I don't know that he should be a guy with an over under of 3.5 strikeouts when it's plus money on the over.
So in the event that he pitches around 6 innings, which I don't necessarily know that we're going to get here, I had him slightly over 5. So I'm with you, but he's got to pitch through the game clean to be able to get there, or relatively clean to be able to get to that number. And I just don't know that he does against this Mets lineup that is good at drawing walks, getting on base, could exploit everything he's been poor at this season. But that's it. If he gets through the innings, I think he could get there, but that's all part of it, obviously.
And with that said, just based on that number, even in 5 innings, you would still have him projected the over. And don't forget, it was plus
for
money.
The over on that.
I don't need this bet to even win more than 50% of the time over the course of the year for it to be plus EV. So I just think he's being really crazy undervalued. I get why. If we have to pull out one silver lining from him, he's coming off his best start of the season. He just pitched 6 shutout innings with 9 strikeouts and 1 walk. Did he figure something out in that start? Probably not, but maybe. But I could be optimistic when I want to with some of the bets that I've already placed. By the way, Butthole Jenkins brought something up that really, really surprised me as well, because he said that, wow, Tim Beckham's still playing baseball. Yeah, that also surprised me the other day when I saw Tim Beckham out on the field. I thought it had to have been a different Tim Beckham.
Yeah, right. I did not catch that yet. Which team is he on? I honestly didn't even notice that he's in the that he's still in the league yet. If he's in one of these
he just got called up by the Twins.
No kidding.
Yeah,
I think him hanging on.
Yeah, I can't. Number 1 overall pick at one point. It never produced good minor. It caused me to go back and look through his minor league numbers. It was never even good in the minor leagues, and so far this year, it's not been great. He's 9 plate appearances. He has struck out in 4 of them and not done anything else. So not great. It's only 9 plate appearances, but the negative 48 WRC plus is never all that great looking.
He's 32 now. Jeez.
Yeah,
it's starting to make me feel old. I remember him more from that 2018 season with the Orioles. He, for some reason, is in my head a little bit more from that than even the Rays seasons before that. But yeah, wow.
Yeah, I remember the one season he was. I remember the one season he was good, and I was thinking like, oh, maybe Tim Beckham's finally coming on as a late developing player, because he was in like his mid to late 20s, and he had that one year where I think he got traded from Tampa Bay to Baltimore, and he kind of fetched a return. I mean,
that
Tampa
might
Bay,
actually be the season that's more in my head because I'm looking at the numbers now. And yeah, 575 plate appearances, 22 homers, 6 stolen bases. So it's probably that, whereas the two teams, because the next year he wasn't all that good for the O's.
No, unfortunately, an aberration because
Yeah.
he just had that 1 year number 1 overall pick, and it's kind of cool when those guys end up panning out, but it just didn't for him. But
It's also interesting. I mean, it was interesting when we were looking at JD Davis when you and Eric were doing the show yesterday or the day before, and it just speaks to like a lot of this boils down to just the opportunity that these guys get in certain situations, how they're being used by these teams. And the Mets saw JD Davis as a platoon player, and he's really not. So some of that, not the case with Tim Beckham here, but it's just interesting to look at that and look through like how a guy's used. Sometimes you see a guy switch teams and all of a sudden he catches on and really starts going. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that from JD Davis with the Giants now.
All right, so let's wrap up pitchers like this. If you are playing one spend up pitcher on FanDuel, Terry, that is not the chalk, who would you go with? You'll give your FanDuel answer. I'll give my DK answer, and then we'll go with a pay down option. So FanDuel, you're playing one pitcher who will say 9K or higher and isn't one of the chalk players. Who's the guy for you?
9K or higher, not one of the chalk pitchers. Probably Tyler Mahle at 9K.
All right. Yeah, I could dig that. For me,
wait, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. I don't know why I was thinking 9K or you said 9K or higher. I was thinking 9K or lower. The answer is Dylan Cease for 10-9, and if we're not considering 15% chalk. And then after that, I might throw Mahle in there because I don't really trust Lauer and I don't trust the upside for Framber. So then it might be Mahle.
So for me, as the expensive pivot play, I'll say Framber Valdez, only project for 2% ownership on DK. With Valdez, there has been a sneaky amount of strikeout upside. By the way, another guy I have a bet on for over 4.5 strikeouts today. I don't think that number exists anymore either, but Valdez's strikeout rate has increased with each month this season. So as the season's gone on, I'll pull up his splits. He has slightly increased the strikeout rate to the point where he's like pretty viable as a strikeout pitcher. I don't think there's that many strikeouts to be had in this Guardians lineup, but I also think we're just comparing pitchers in a different way this slate compared to other slates. And I think there's reason to think that he has a better than 2% chance to say land in an optimal lineup. So Framber Valdez, May, 19.5% K rate, June, 23.3%, and then July, 26.4%. There's been some individual outings. We had really big strikeout upside. Also July, that comes with a 2.73 FIP, 2.87 XFIP. He's been a stud as of late. And the fact that we could get him on a crappy pitching slate at only 2% ownership, that's going to be my pay up contrarian guy.
I don't dislike it. Like I said, I mean, he's an excellent pitcher at just limiting offense, gives you a safe floor. And in those games where he finds that ceiling for strikeouts, then yeah, you see him pop to the top of a lot of slates because he's never all that popular or rarely all that popular. And he does have that capability from time to time. So I like that call. I'm going to give him a little nudge here to make sure I'm getting some of them.
All right. If you guys check out in the YouTube chat right now, our guy Rinpack just did a little giveaway here. So go check that out. Let me see what the giveaway is. I'm going to click on it because I'm seeing this for the first time too. I don't know what the giveaway is. Let's go over to, we'll do this together, guys. Everybody go to @Stokastic_com on Twitter. And here's what we're going to do as I read the prompt. Reply with the pitcher who will get the most strikeouts tonight, and one lucky winner with the right pitcher will win a free month of Stokastic Plus. Like this tweet and must be following @StokasticMLB and @Stokastic_com to be eligible. So Terry, if you had to pick which pitcher is going to rack up the most strikeouts today, who would be your pick? You go with anybody on the board?
Top strikeout number for me. I mean, it's difficult to not just go to Robbie Ray and go with the chalk on that one. He's projecting right there for me. I think I'll just go Robbie Ray. I'll take it easy.
I think I'm going to go Dylan Cease just because I think more people are going to answer Robbie Ray, and I think their strikeout projection is probably fairly comparable. So I would go for that reason. I would go Dylan Cease. I think if you're going with anybody other than Cease or Ray, you're probably going a little too crazy though.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And like we talked about, I think there's definitely some nice upside for Dylan Cease there. I've got it slightly in Ray's favor, but it's very close. I have no issue with that answer whatsoever.
And then the other part of the question I was asking you before, Terry, if you had to go with a spend down pitcher, so go somebody under 9K now, make it clear, under 9K, who isn't, I was going to say not one of the chalk options, but on FanDuel that doesn't really exist. Like there is no chalk option under 9K. So if you could roster any pitcher under 9K on FanDuel, who would be the guy for you to go to?
So the one that I am going to use as my official answer here so that I don't steer people wrong is Patrick Sandoval. I like that spot better. I have a little bit more faith in it. The one that's pushing through my model a little bit stronger than that, unfortunately, immediately projected but one person above Patrick Sandoval is Arman Marquez. And I don't necessarily trust that. He's a guy that I came into the year saying, hey, this is a guy that nobody believes in. I kind of believe in. Once we get him on a different team, hey, look out. He's going to be good. He's on my dynasty squad for $1. I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. It's a good matchup against the Diamondbacks. Could find some nice strikeouts. Only cost 7,400. Not drawing all that much ownership. So for me, I'll have too much Arman Marquez again today. Where I think the field should go, and I'm also going very aggressively, is Patrick Sandoval.
Yeah, it is. It's the Klubot for me. I'm going with Corey Kluber.
Oh, I forgot about Kluber.
Yeah. I mean, I talked about the merits of it before, so I just think that it's a really good matchup against the Detroit Tigers, which honestly, like this, Kluber's been serviceable this year. A good matchup. That's enough for me to get to him at basically no ownership on sure. FanDuel or DK. Any other loose ends for you to tie up at pitcher? If not, we'll hit on some stacks to close us out.
No, we just did it with my lamentations about Arman Marquez, so I'm good.
All right. So we've got that giveaway going on over on Twitter that Ryan posted. But if you guys want to know another way to get access to all of the tools that we have over at Stokastic.com, including all of the tools that Terry and I use to build our lineups, stuff like the top stacks tool, top pitchers tool, player projections, our new top batters tool, all stuff that is just invaluable. If it wasn't for those tools, I wouldn't be making money at MLB DFS. I'd just be guessing. I would have no clue who to play at any point in time. So that stuff is really valuable, especially looking at the ownership projections and our projections of players being top scorers relative to those ownership projections. And if you want to know how you get access to all of that kind of stuff, or just some nice little discounts we have going on right now, because we have our new DraftKings MLB Night Owl tool, which is going to be free for the rest of the season. And in honor of that if you are going there, checking it out, we also have a coupon for $1 for 1 week of Stokastic Plus MLB weekly package. All you have to do is sign up using the promo code Night Owl at checkout, NIGHTOWL, Night Owl at checkout. That's going to give you access to everything we have to offer for MLB DFS for 1 week. But this offer is only valid through August 5th, which, do you know what date today is, Terry?
No.
August 5th.
Oh,
August 5th.
How about that?
So if you guys want to sign up, go use that now. Use the promo code Night Owl. Get access to our MLB tools for just $1. All right, let's hit on the stacks now. And there's a lot of teams to get to. No real crazy chalk at offense. The only team on DK that's projected for double-digit ownership is the Kansas City Royals against Josh Winkowski. We've got them projected for 10.2% ownership as a stack. And then over on FanDuel, a couple of teams are a little more popular. The Brewers project for 11% ownership. The Phillies projected for 11% ownership. But here's the real key when I bring up those numbers. No crazy chalk at offense. Fairly spread out when we're considering the slate. So, Terry, what is your number one favorite stack to get to?
So I'm actually in the process of trying to work a little bit more Brewers in still. Like I said at the top of the show, they were projecting out really well for me, number 2 in my home run model, and they were just looking good. But for some reason, I'm not sure what their combinatronics are on this slate, but whatever they're connected to in my sort here is not giving me a ton of them. So I'm giving them a little nudge. Like the spot for the Yanks a lot. I think they're going a little bit under owned, so I'm making sure that I'm getting to a fair share of them. The Phillies were the top spot in my home run model. They were the top spot in the Awesemo top stacks or Stokastic top stacks tool earlier today, and I think still are. So that's a spot that's coming up quite a bit naturally for me. And then both the Braves and the Blue Jays untouched just come up quite a bit for me. So I like both of those spots. It's a date where I'm just kind of leaning into some of the good teams in baseball and just hoping that one of them comes through. I think Adam was saying something similar on the previous show, where it's just like a lot of the better teams are just kind of floating to the top. There's not that many great pitchers on this slate, so the natural talent is just kind of taken over. And that's kind of how it's coming up for me as well here. The one team that's not coming up all that much that I'm noticing now that I do need to give a nudge is the Royals, who you mentioned. They're 4 in my power index, and they were coming up a decent amount on the the sites tools, they're about middle of the road in terms of our top stack percentage, but their ownership is they're a little over on. Maybe I don't need to push them that much. Their stack score is nice. That's what I had noticed earlier in the day. Second highest DK stack score on our on the way that our tools work, and on FanDuel, let's call it the third highest, fourth highest. So I think they're in an interesting spot against Winkowski there. I'm not quite sure why I'm not getting to enough of them either, but I'm going to try and make sure I get a little bit more of them, but probably I'll end up below the field looking where that ownership is.
Yeah, I'm going to be below them. It's not that it's a bad spot. It's just a lot of ownership. There's a lot of offenses to choose from. For me, here's a couple of offenses that I'm really honing in on, and I want to hear what you think, Terry. These are my three favorite offenses on the slate. We've got the Boston Red Sox going up against Zach Greinke. I've been burned by Greinke a decent amount lately. He's actually pitched kind of serviceably, but still, I think this is a spot where I have to look at Greinke's numbers. That expected ERA is at 5.4 for the season. I think that he's more likely to regress than not moving forward. So I still think he's a pitcher to pick on. So like the Red Sox going up against Zach Greinke. Actually, four offense I'm going to tie in. The Brewers up against Robert Duggar. Because, I mean, I look at Duggar's a couple of things. His big league numbers in the limited amount of time we've seen with the big leagues, they suck. Right? He's pitched, 82 innings at the big league level over the course of his career, 6.97 ERA, 5.61 FIP. Don't feel great about that. His ZiPS projection this year is for 6.31 ERA the rest of the season. So I think that he's a pitcher who's pretty easy to get to. So Brewers, that's going to be another option for me. And then it is the Houston Astros going up against, I forgot his name. The pitcher's making his debut for the Guardians. It is
oh, you know what? I don't even have it because I had Brian Shaw in there as the opener.
Yeah. So it is what's the guy's name? Gaddis.
I probably get it.
Gaddis. So I actually think he could. I think he could be more than an opener in this game, though.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize they had swapped that.
Yeah,
I had Brian. Like it was supposed to be the Brian Shaw opener club type of a game.
Yeah, so Hunter Gaddis, if I'm not mistaken, he pitched 6 innings in his most recent minor league start. It was 6 innings. So his recent minor league starts 6 innings, 4 innings, 5 2/3, 5 innings, 5 innings, 5 2/3, 7 innings. I think he's fairly stretched out. Is he good? Probably not. He is a 4.07 ERA in the minor leagues this year overall across both levels. And then also just some not great looking peripheral stats. So last year in A-ball, he had a 4.16 ERA, a 5.04 FIP. I think this is probably just a replacement level quadruple A type pitcher. I think the Astros should have no problem roughing him up. So I'm a little surprised the Astros aren't a little bit higher on. And the other one is going to be the New York
just
Yankees.
Give them a major bump, actually. I'm glad you thank you for calling that out because I had not caught that change in the pitching. And he's there. He just for the Guardians, he's their 37th ranked team prospect. So below average grades across the board on Fangraphs in terms of the traditional scouting. A 5.04 xFIP in AAA this year in just 10 innings, a 3.61 in AA, but pitching in AA at 24, that doesn't really impress me. So I think that's a target for sure. And I just gave the Astros a major bump here.
Yeah. And you never know. Like yesterday, I was really heavy on the White Sox against
You too, huh?
a pitcher who was making his debut. They had chances to score. They made some good contact and they just were not able to put runs up on the board. The White Sox, they never cease being disappointing this year. But pun there, if you didn't pick up on it, using cease in the White Sox thing. But so when it comes with the White Sox, sometimes maybe shit, sometimes also shit. But the other stack that I like getting to, New York Yankees going up against Dakota Hudson. I know he's a ground ball pitcher. I know that he has a 4.1 ERA this year, which isn't great, but not terrible either. But ground ball rate this year for Dakota Hudson, it was 65.4% last year. It's all the way down to 52.2%. Not that it's bad, but it's still not quite the same ground balls he's been inducing in the past. In addition, the 4.1 ERA comes with a 5.48 expected ERA and a 4.62 FIP. So he's benefited from some good luck. I think he's going to regress going forward. It's a matchup against the Yankees. So those are really my 4 favorite stacks of the day, just to reiterate to the audience here. Yankees, Red Sox, Brewers, Astros. Does that all sound reasonable to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great call on the Astros. Like I said, I gave them a big nudge. I was getting a bunch of Yanks and I was pushing them up a little bit. So they're one of my, third or fourth highest owned teams. And I just think they're under owned. You talk about everybody's going to Aaron Judge at 7.7%, I guess. That's the highest owned, 11.4% for Judge on DK. Everyone else in the low single digits, everybody else on both sides below 3%, or excuse me, Rizzo's drawing 3.1% on DK. That's easy to get to. They're not prohibitively expensive like we've seen with this Yankees lineup in spots. Like Josh Donaldson hitting 5th for 2,700, Carp hitting 6th is 4,000 on the FanDuel slate, 49 on the DK slate, but he's put up better numbers than that salary so far. So it's weird to say, but I think that's a little bit cheap on DK for Carpenter there. I don't love the IKF Trevino spot in this lineup. But Andrew Benintendi batting 9th, I think, is kind of interesting because then you get him as a wraparound play back to the RBI spots at the top of the lineup. So I think that's an interesting play, both from a real lineup construction point of view and from a DFS point of view. You're getting a 382 on base percentage guy hitting out of the 9 hole coming into the LeMahieu, Judge, Rizzo, Torres, Donaldson part of the lineup. I think that's a great spot for Benintendi to hit here. So I'm kind of interested to get him as a wraparound play for only 3,000 on FanDuel, 42 on DK.
Yeah, so those are the teams that I'm going to be building around. We'll talk about some more contrarian stacks in a second, but first I have a super chat here to answer from Jorge Giacomi. He's asking us, why would you incline for Lauer when he has been bad from a fantasy points perspective, plus Milwaukee has been bad versus Cincinnati this season? Thoughts? So a couple of things. First of all, I don't really care what any individual team has done against some other team for the year. That doesn't matter. As far as Lauer goes, I don't really like him at his current ownership. So the reason anybody would play him is because the pitching options suck today, and he's a good matchup and he's a serviceable pitcher. Relative to his ownership, I don't like him on DK. Like, he's somebody I'm about half the field on. There's other pitching options I like getting to. I think he's being overowned. But why are people getting to him? Because he's cheap, he's in a good matchup, and the pitchers are terrible. It's really not more complicated than that. That's all of the reasoning, pretty much.
Yeah, he is my least favorite out of that chalky group of pitchers. And actually, in this latest version of this sort, and I'm going to have to correct this in the next couple of minutes, I don't have any of him. So I want to get to about 5% if the field was on like 8% on the FanDuel slate, if I remember correctly. I said earlier in the show I was happy to be at 8%. I think I'll be lucky to land at 5%, but I'm also okay with that. I don't really think it's the greatest spot out of all those spots with some attention going there. I'm getting more of Corey Kluber now because I was pushing that up through the model here. I was talking about Molly earlier, and he's not really coming up all that much for me now. So I'm going to unwind that one a little bit more than I did earlier. Just, I do believe in the spot. I do think there's strikeout upside, but I'm not getting to him as much. So I don't want to impress on people that I'm overly enthusiastic about it the way he's coming up for me.
All right. So now here's another hitting offense stack perspective here. If you're going with a really low owned stack, what's the team you want to get to for extremely low ownership today? I did shout out the Yankees. That's technically going to be my answer. They're only projected for 3% ownership on DK, which is, crazy low for the Yankees. And what I consider to not be a bad matchup against Dakota Hudson. Once again, I understand the ground balls are there, but still 3% ownership for them on both DK and FanDuel. I think that's certainly a team to be overweight to. What is a contrarian stack that you really, really like getting overweight to the field to on the slate, Terry?
So to continue what I was just talking about, actually, I am getting to a decent amount of the Blue Jays. So I think that's what actually knocked Tyler Mahle down a little bit more than I thought. They're 2.5% positively leveraged on the FanDuel slate. I assume they're similarly low owned on DK, 3.5% positively leveraged on the DK slate. Tyler Mahle, excellent strikeout pitcher, lots of upside when he's going right, but he's definitely a guy who can put too many hitters on and give up the long ball. So I think that's kind of an interesting spot going to a great Blue Jays lineup. That is now added Whit Merrifield as the leadoff hitter into Vladdy, Lourdes Gurriel, Teoscar Hernandez, Bo Bichette, Matt Chapman, even Danny Jansen. I don't love the Tapia Espinal part at the bottom end of this lineup, but everybody in the lineup except for Vladdy owned well below 5%. Vladdy at 5% on both sites. You can sign me up for some shares of Blue Jays. I will still try and get my few Tyler Mahle shares there, though. He's 9K and only 2.7% owned. So I'll take a little scumdacker on that one.
Yeah, I think so. Another thing too about the offenses on this slate, we've got here are the negatively leveraged teams today. We've got the Brewers being a little bit overowned, the Phillies a little bit overowned, and the Rays a little bit overowned as far as FanDuel is concerned. And then like every other team is either properly or underowned. The ownership is so spread out. I really think that what you guys could be doing here is just pick your favorite stack. I don't think you have to be overly concerned about ownership. Like I like Milwaukee a lot today. Are they a little bit overowned? Sure. They have 8.5% projected ownership on DK, 7% top stack odds. That's not going to prohibit me from getting to a team. I'm just kind of picking out some of my favorite spots. And then I get really contrarian with the Yankees and Astros. These were fairly contrarian stacks today. So that's also kind of where I'm differentiating. I could get two of the best offense in baseball and positive, or lose what I think are positive matchups at low ownership. I could do that, and I could kind of.
And that's something we've talked about all season long. Is just, hey, sometimes you just want to go to these really, really good teams when they're underowned. These great lineups when they're underowned, and you just don't even think too hard about the pitching matchup. So I agree that those are great spots and spots that I want to get to. They're coming up quite a bit now for me. So I'll be getting to that. And as far as like a team like the Brewers, yeah, this is a slate where there's so many different options. The field's going in a lot of different directions outside of pitching. So in stacking and in using these hitters, you don't have to sweat the ownership combinations all that much. Just don't go putting Brewers and Robbie Ray into every single one of your lineups, or like Brewers, Robbie Ray, Eric Lauer into every single one of your lineups, because then you're probably going to run into some dupes into the field. But it's easy enough to get different on this slate.
All right. So here's what we're going to do. We got a couple minutes left, and then I got dinner planned, so I'm going to head out. Terry, the people want to know, Butthole Jenkins, if he's in the chat, we get like 30 seconds into the show. We haven't even talked yet. And Butthole Jenkins is asking us for dong picks. So guys, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Terry and it's time for the hottest dong picks in the industry. So Terry, you're going to go into your home run model and tell us which player you want to give as your home run pick for the day. And then I'm going to go over to OddShopper, sponsor today's show, and find the best home run bet of the day per our projections. And that's how we're going to close out here. So Terry, what's the home run pick?
I like it. So looking at the old home run model here, there's one guy who's got a Titanic number, basically double the magic number, but he's super chalky. He was the same guy who was leading the model yesterday. Mr. Kyle Schwarber's up top. Rhys Hoskins is number 2, kind of supporting that Phillies upside we were talking about. The guy I'll pick just because he's probably also similarly popular, but at least I'm going down a few spots from those outrageous guys. I'll take Hunter Renfroe, who ranks 4th in my model here, playing for the Brewers. They're very chalky as well, but I just like going to Renfroe when he pops up from time to time. Usually delivers for me. So that's my official pick, but Kyle Schwarber is the very top of the model with a bullet.
So the number 1 home run bet over at OddShopper is Jared Walsh plus 600 to homer. I get it's a left-on-left matchup. Here's why it still makes sense to me. You know what Robbie Ray does when he doesn't strike guys out? He gives up a lot of hard contact, and a lot of them end up being homers. So Robbie Ray, even last year when Robbie Ray won the Cy Young, like the luckiest you were ever seen at pitching, I get tilted every time I think about it. But Robbie Ray, even last year, where he had by far the best year of his career, had a 15.9% home run to fly ball rate. This year, 16.3%. This guy gives up long balls. So is Jared Walsh hitting a home run? Am I going to say that's a lock or the most likely thing to happen? No, but I do think that the odds are too long based on the matchup, which even though Robbie Ray has been an above average pitcher this year, he still serves up home runs. And I think that when the books are just pricing Jared Walsh at plus 600 to homer today, we have him with an 18% chance to homer. Those aren't crazy odds, but at plus 600, that's good for a 23% expected ROI. So Jared Walsh, that's the home run pick of the day. How do you feel about him?
I do like it a lot. He's over the magic number in my model, is at an 11.97. So not the very top, but certainly in the top handful of guys. And everything you said about Robbie Ray is dead on. He's a guy who always gives up plenty of hard hit, decent barrel rate. This year, 39.5% hard hit, 8.2% barrel. Last year, 42.9, 9.8, 4.16% home run rate this year, 4.27% last year. He's a guy who gives up home runs. I do not dislike that call at that number.
Yeah, so we've also got some chats here in the chat that I'll read off before we sign out here. Aaron Hines, he's predicting a Profar homer. That's probably the least likely home run pick that we've seen out there, Jerks and Profar, mostly because the other names that we're seeing put in here is, oh no, never mind. Malokar said Daz Cameron. That's okay. That qualifies as being very contrarian. But then other ones, it's like Jordan, Bregman. We had Rafael Devers from Ryan Brennenbaum. Braden Vegmoren had Bregman. We've got I assume this is David Peralta from Arca Thelza. And Rowdy, well, this is a very bold pick. Now people are trying to one up each other. Little J 420, Little J 420. He's calling for a Rowdy Tellez double dong.
Ooh,
So that's about as somebody calling for 2 home runs in the same game. That's
Rowdy hits him in
about
bunches.
as I'll top 3 home runs for Jared Walsh just to be a one up.
5 home runs for MJ Melendez, number 8 in my model. Let's just call that one home run. I was looking for an oddball guy. MJ Melendez is up there. O'Neal Cruz is up there a little bit as well, but we don't expect that game to play.
Yeah, Steve McGee is putting in Aaron Judge. I mean, if you want to go with the most likely outcome, it's probably always going to be Aaron
That's the
Judge.
tough part about doing this. It's like, all right, you want to get to like an interesting pick, but one that's not too off the board. And then like you can only use guys like Judge and Schwarber so many times before it's like, all right, you're just picking the chalk every day. Makes it difficult.
So one final thought before we close here. So guys, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like last week when Judge was on just that, and not that the run is ended, but when he had that stretch where it was like 10 home runs in 10 games for Aaron Judge, you go over to DK's like plus 140 to homer. It's like, oh, this is absurd. We're saying that. It's saying like it's nearly 50-50 for him to homer, which, would have him on pace to at those kind of odds. We're expecting he's a better power hitter than peak Barry Bonds. So, all right, that does it for us.
People were probably slamming that bet across the country too.
Yeah, I'm sure people were betting it like crazy. That's the reason the number got so low.
Yeah.
One more time, guys, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys have a great weekend and good luck tonight.